Hello students, and welcome to my hands-on Penetration Testing Labs 3.0 course. If you're familiar with my previous courses, this is part 3 of the series. However, this is a standalone course, and all of these courses can be taken in any order or by themselves. We're going to be diving straight into the hands-on technical labs with very little focus on theory, as in my opinion, this is the best way to prepare for the actual job and for hands-on practical certifications such as OSCP. There's no better way as a penetration tester to gain the raw skills that are needed on the job than to actually use and master the necessary technology and skills. I should mention right now that this course requires a reliable internet connection and a decent laptop or PC which can support at least 2 virtual machines. I suggest that you have at least 8 gigs of RAM, but the more the better, especially if you want to make an advanced virtual lab in which to practice and hone your pen testing skills. Ideally, you should have at least 16 or 32 gigs of RAM and a decent processor, but you can get away with less, like 4 or 8. During our coursework, we'll be using VirtualBox as a software hypervisor in order to spin up Kali Linux, which is an industry-standard penetration testing operating system. We'll also be setting up several intentionally vulnerable VMs in order to demonstrate vulnerabilities within a variety of network services and web applications, walking through various tactics, techniques, and procedures to simulate adversarial activity. I'll be providing all of the necessary software, which is completely free and open source. We will be covering enumeration, vulnerability scanning, and automated and manual exploitation of vulnerabilities. More specifically, we'll be going over key essential pen testing skills such as port scanning and service enumeration, local file inclusion or LFI, web directory brute forcing, buffer overflows and exploit development, SQL injection, cross-site scripting or XSS, various types of reverse shells, a variety of local privilege escalation, and much more. All of the technology which is utilized within these recordings is current as of June 2019. That being said, technology is constantly changing and evolving, so some of the software seen in these videos may be different when you take the course. However, it should be similar enough for you to figure it out with quick Google searches or with my assistance if needed. You can always reach out to me via the messaging or Q&A system, though I highly encourage you to perform troubleshooting on your own, as the ability to research and troubleshoot is one of the single most important skill sets as a penetration tester and IT professional in general. I'm very much looking forward to working with all of you, and I really hope that you enjoy my course. Please leave a positive review if you enjoy it, as it allows me to reach more and more dedicated students and existing or aspiring cybersecurity professionals. Due to the popular demand in my previous pen testing courses, I'm going to provide a technical explanation of many but not all of the commands and tools that we'll be utilizing within this course. Also, in the resources attached to this lecture, I have a bunch of URLs that contain additional comprehensive information related to what we're about to cover. If there's anything that you're confused about or need further information on that you cannot find out on your own research, please feel free to contact me via the Q&A system or direct messaging. If you're already well versed in basic to intermediate Linux commands, you should be okay with skipping this lecture. Otherwise, stay tuned for the new information or for this refresher, depending on your skill level. Let's start out with reverse shells. So, what are reverse shells? Well, in our case, they're a remote shell that's initiated from the target or destination to the attacker machine or the source. For example, Kali Linux is the attacker machine. A vulnerable VM such as PwnLab is the target. A reverse shell will function by forcing PwnLab, the target or destination, to initiate a connection back to Kali Linux, the source. The concept of reverse shells may be confusing at first, but let's go over this quick demonstration to hopefully provide some clarity. This command uses bash to create a network connection with the IP address 192.168.56.102 over port 8080. In order for this to work, the host 192.168.56.102 must have some sort of listener like Netcat or Metasploit's multi-handler actively listening on port 8080. Now let's break down what this command is actually doing. So bash-i creates an interactive instance of bash. First of all, you need to understand that there are three default files in bash. stdin, which is standard input, such as from the keyboard. stdout, which is standard output, such as from the terminal. And stderr, which is standard error, which is where the errors are output. The file descriptors for standard input, standard output, and standard error are 0, 1, and 2 respectively. This symbol here, the greater than ampersand, causes it to send standard output and standard error through the connection /dev/TCP, the IP address and the port. Now the 0 greater than ampersand 1 sets standard input to be read through the connection. Now let's see what happens when I execute this bash command. As you can see here, we've acquired a reverse shell to Netcat. This next reverse shell command is a simple one-liner that uses Python code to import the socket library and initiate a network socket to the IP address and port specified within sconnect. As you see right here, IP address of Kali Linux and port 4444. In this scenario, the listening server must be set up on the attack machine. This will be some type of listener such as Netcat or Metasploit's multi-handler. Please note that for this reverse shell to work properly, we need Python to be installed on the target machine. This is more likely to be present on a Linux machine rather than Windows. Now let's try executing the Python reverse shell command. As you can see, Python isn't installed on this machine, therefore it will not work. However, you're going to see this command being used to establish reverse shells multiple times throughout this course. Let's move on to spawning TTY shells. A fully interactive terminal is a TTY shell. In Unix terminology, a TTY is a type of device file that implements additional commands other than read and write. In its earlier days, it was referred to as teletypewriter or TTY for short. Basically what it is a terminal. Sometimes we get limited access via exploits, resulting in shells with limited functionality, such as what you're looking at right now on the screen. This is not as favorable as a TTY shell. Sometimes, once we get limited access shells, we can run code such as Bash, Python, or Perl to gain a fully interactive or TTY shell. Let's take a look at this simple command here. This is a Python one-liner to import the pty library, which handles sudo terminal utilities and attempts to spawn a bin sh shell. Assuming this machine has Python installed on it, it should work. As you can see, it spawned a TTY shell that should be fully interactive. Let's move on to another command, this time using bash. This command here spawns a bin sh shell by trying to run the command interactively with the -i switch. Okay, as you can see, the tty shell has been spawned. Now let's briefly cover some of the primary tools that we'll be utilizing throughout this course. As you progress, you'll be seeing me using all of these industry standard pen testing tools in order to enumerate and exploit several vulnerable VMs. NetDiscover is a network address discovery tool, as its name implies. It's only good on local area networks, as it's based on Address Resolution Protocol, or ARP, to send ARP requests and sniff for replies. Since our lab environment will be within a host-only LAN, we can use this to scan for targets. Network Mapper, or simply Nmap, is an open source tool for vulnerability scanning and network discovery. Nmap is one of the most well-known tools in the cybersecurity community, particularly for penetration testers. We'll be using this throughout the course to enumerate services and scan common ports. Nikto is an open source web server scanner that performs vulnerability scanning against web servers. For comprehensive information on Nikto, check their official documentation. Dirb is a web content scanner. It looks for existing and/or hidden web objects. This can be accomplished by running a dictionary-based brute force attack, analyzing the web server's response to enumerate web directories. This tool is important when trying to find vulnerabilities such as broken access control within web applications. Metasploit is one of the most well-known tools within the cybersecurity field, especially for penetration testers. Metasploit is a penetration testing platform that has the ability to find, exploit, and validate vulnerabilities. It also has great capabilities such as standing up a multi-handler listener to get reliable reverse shells. Burp Suite is another well-known tool within the cybersecurity and pen testing field. Burp Suite is best utilized for penetration testing against web applications. The Pro version is obviously way better because it includes the scanner and multiple other features that are useful. However, for this course, we'll be using the free version. As we move forward in the course, I'll be showing you how to set up the proxy and utilize some of its best features for a pen test.
Due to the recent changes in Kali Linux 2020, I'll be providing a custom-built VM for all of my courses, although this VM was built specifically for my newest course, Hands-On Penetration Testing Labs 4.0. This can be downloaded from the Google Drive that's attached to this lecture as a text file, as you see on screen. Kali Linux 2020 has one primary difference from all of its predecessors, being that it does not come configured with the root user. Instead, they've implemented an unprivileged user named Kali, which requires the usage of sudo to elevate privileges for many commands. You can use the unprivileged Kali account if you want to, but I've configured a Kali Linux 2020 VM which is tailored for this course that has a root user created the same way as the previous version of Kali. Additionally, I've installed most of the tools that will be required for enumeration and exploitation during the course of the upcoming lectures for your convenience. In order to get it, open up a web browser as you see on screen, access my provided Google Drive, and download the Kali Linux OVA file. Do this, just click download. Click download anyway. After the download is complete, double-click the OVA file, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Okay, here's the OVA file. I'm just going to double-click that. It is going to open up VirtualBox Manager. Once that's open, just name this Kali Linux 2020, and I'm going to click Import. Just give that a bit. Once the import is complete, let's check our network settings. So right-click Kali Linux 2020, go to Settings, click the Network tab, And for adapter 1, we want it attached to NAT. We could alternatively have it attached to the bridged adapter. Either one is going to give us internet connectivity. For adapter 2, we want it set to host only, and make sure that you have a name selected. If you don't have one, then you'll have to create one. So the host only adapter is the one that is going to allow us to communicate with all of the vulnerable VMs which we'll be attacking during this course. To start it up, just highlight this and click Start. The two accounts I have for you here are username root and password Tor, or T-O-O-R, all lowercase, and username Kali and password Kali, K-A-L-I, also all lowercase. So there you go, you're all set up. Enjoy.
This video will show you how to download and configure Kali Linux for VirtualBox. Kali Linux is the primary operating system that we'll be using for penetration testing during the remainder of this course. Kali Linux is an industry standard for penetration testing and has numerous conveniently built-in tools for enumeration and exploitation. We're going to be downloading the most recent version as of June 2019 at the time of this recording, so the version that you download may be a little bit different. However, in most cases, it should be the same or just slightly different in terms of commands and usability. If big changes occur that severely impact its usage, I will make updates to the course as needed. Within this lecture and all other lectures in my course, there are text files attached which contain all commands that we'll be using and any relevant URLs. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me via the messaging or Q&A system if you're having any issues that you're not able to figure out on your own. That being said, I highly suggest that you try troubleshooting on your own first, because troubleshooting and research on the fly is an extremely valuable skill to earn. As a penetration tester, Google will be your best friend. Learn how to use it to master searching for various vulnerabilities, exploits, and solutions to issues that you may need to troubleshoot. The first step is to download and install VirtualBox from virtualbox.org, which we won't be covering in this course because it's very simple. Just download it and click through the installation. Once you have VirtualBox installed, we're going to download the most recent version of Kali Linux for VirtualBox. As I stated before, these URLs are included in a text file with this lecture. Otherwise, you can just Google Kali Linux download. We're going to be grabbing the 64-bit OVA file for Kali Linux, as my host operating system is 64-bit. I recommend using Windows 7 or higher as your host operating system, as I find it to be the most reliable and compatible with virtualization in general. I have Windows 10. Also, I recommend that you have at least 8 gigs of RAM, but preferably higher, because we'll be using multiple virtual machines at the same time, and you'll want performance to be manageable. Personally, I have 64 gigs of RAM on my system, and I'm going to be using this system during the remainder of my course. Now let's click the link for the Kali VirtualBox download. Kali Linux VirtualBox images. I'm going to click the 64-bit download link. Now go to your download location and double-click the OVA file. This will open it in VirtualBox Manager. If you do not have VirtualBox yet, pause and download it and install it now. Otherwise, double-click the Kali Linux OVA. Rename it if you want to. Click Import. First, let's make sure that we have a host-only network set up. Host-only is a form of networking that is completely isolated within the host computer, having no internet connectivity. We need this so that our Kali VM can communicate with the other VMs that we'll be using throughout this course. To check this, click File, Host Network Manager. Now you'll notice that I already have one set up. You should also. However, if you don't or you need to make a new one for whatever reason, I'll show you how. All you have to do is click Create. Make sure you have DHCP server enabled checked. Click Configure Adapter Automatically. Click Apply. That's all there is to it. You're good to go. Now let's make some configuration changes for Kali Linux. Right-click Kali Linux. Click Settings. Go to System. Now I'm going to be raising my RAM to about 32 gigs. If you don't have that much, raise it to about half of the RAM that you do have. Next, go to Pointing Device. We're going to change this to PS2 Mouse. Otherwise, we're going to get an error when we try to boot our Kali Linux system. Now, if you want to, you can go to Processor and raise it up. I'm going to raise mine to 6. Next, go to the Network tab. Click on Adapter 2. Check Enable Network Adapter. Attached to Host Only Adapter. Make sure you have a VirtualBox Host Only Ethernet adapter name selected. This is going to be the same one that you're going to select for all of your vulnerable virtual machines that you're going to be accessing with Kali Linux. Now go to USB. Uncheck Enable USB Controller. Otherwise, you're going to get an error when you try to boot up Kali Linux. Click OK. Now with Kali Linux highlighted, click Start. If you get any errors, go back to the beginning and make sure that all configuration that I covered was followed properly. The default credentials are lowercase ROOT or root. Click Next. Default password is lowercase TOOR. Click Sign In. Now open up a terminal. This should be located on the left-hand side where your applications are. Click it. Now I'm going to change the preferences. You can make them however you like, but I'm setting them up to look better for the course. Click Edit, Preferences. Click the plus sign to add new profile, naming mine Jesse. Click Create. I'm going to change the transparency. Put it to 0 because I don't like it. Just uncheck it. Now the text, I'm going to change that to custom font. I'll raise it up to 14. Click Select. Once you have it to your liking, click the arrow here and set it as default. Now let's go over an important command, ifconfig. This command shows all of the available network interfaces on Kali Linux. If you followed my suggested configuration, ETH0 should be your NATed interface, which has internet connectivity, and ETH1 is the host-only interface, which will be used to communicate with other host-only VMs. Okay, so I immediately notice that there's no IP address configured on ETH0. So we're going to have to fix that, and I'm going to show you how. To fix our problem, we can type service smbd restart and dhclient ETH0. This should give us an IP address on that interface. After running the aforementioned command, run ifconfig again to make sure that the issue has been resolved. So ifconfig, there we go. You see right here? Now we have an IP address. So now we should have internet connectivity. Let's run a quick ping command to make sure that we have internet connectivity by pinging a public-facing IP address. So type in ping 8.8.8.8. This is Google's DNS. Good. You have internet connectivity. Just press Ctrl-C to cancel that. Now let's take a snapshot of the VM. This is a best practice, which is going to allow you to revert to this point in time in the VM in case you want to start over or undo any changes for whatever reason. So we're going to go up to Machine, take Snapshot. I'm going to name this Fresh Install and click OK. Now let's run an update and upgrade command to make sure that all packages are up to date. To do this, type in apt-get update and apt-get upgrade-y. This is going to say yes to all the prompts. Let that run, choose all the default selections, and should be good. Once the update and upgrade commands have completed and you've verified everything is working properly, we can move on to the next lab. In this quick lecture, I'm going to explain where you can find the vulnerable VMs that are going to be utilized within the remainder of this course. As you can see here on screen, I'm providing a Google Drive location where you can conveniently download all of the vulnerable VMs. Alternatively, you could grab them from VulnHub with the exception of the Windows box, which is only available here. If you lack storage space, I suggest that you download them one by one, as these files are pretty large. For those who have limited storage space, you could buy a cheap external hard drive and download the files to that instead of your internal hard drive. This video will cover the enumeration and exploitation of the intentionally vulnerable Linux VM, Goldeneye 1. I'm choosing specific VulnHub VMs which are said to be similar to OSCP lab machines, because in my opinion, that is the most relevant certification for penetration testers. I'd like to think of my course as a supplementary preparation for that, although no actual spoilers or content that mirrors Offensive Security's coursework is present within my courses. This is in no way a replacement for their stellar content and their PWK course, which prepares you for OSCP. You can download Goldeneye 1 from VulnHub, or you can get it from my Google Drive, which I've conveniently set up for you. The URLs are contained in a text file within this lecture, along with all commands used. Once you have the OVA file, double-click it, and it'll open it in VirtualBox Manager. After it's loaded, click Import. I've already done it, so I don't have to show you. Now let's go to its settings to make sure that it has the same host-only interface with which our Kali Linux VM is configured. Right-click Goldeneye, click Settings, click the Network tab. Good. Same host-only adapter. With Goldeneye highlighted, click Start. you should see this login prompt. This means that Goldeneye is finished booting. Now go back to your Kali Linux VM. If you don't already have it open, go ahead and start that up as well. Open it and open up a terminal. Now the first step in this lab and all my other labs is to find the IP address of the target. Now there are a few ways that we can do this. However, for the duration of this course, we're going to be using NetDiscover because we're in an isolated host-only LAN. Please note that if you're doing remote host discovery, which is over the internet, this will not work, and your best bet is to use Nmap. NetDiscover uses ARP requests, or Address Resolution Protocol, to IP addresses or IP ranges and waits for replies, showing which hosts are active. Since our host-only interface is ETH1, let's do a NetDiscover scan for that interface. To do so, type netdiscover-i ETH1 and hit enter. After a little while, we'll get some IP addresses back. Yours may be different. The correct IP address is likely to be the last one listed. If you're unsure which one is correct, try all of them until you get the right IP address for Goldeneye. Now we're going to run an Nmap scan. Nmap is a very versatile, industry-standard tool for pen testing. Some of its key features are enumeration and vulnerability identification, mostly with its NSE scripts. I'm going to run an Nmap scan as so, Nmap-P-, that is going to scan all 65535 ports. I'm also going to use the -A switch. This is going to enable OS and version detection, script scanning, and traceroute. Finally, let's put the IP address in for Goldeneye and hit enter. Okay, we have a couple open ports here. We have port 25, which is running Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP, port 80, which is running an Apache web server, and a few high ports running SSL with an unknown service and POP3, or Post Office Protocol 3. The first thing I want to check is port 80 by opening up a web browser and accessing the IP address directly over HTTP. So let's open up Firefox and check it out. You can open up Firefox here on the left side. IP address of Goldeneye. Okay, so Goldeneye gives us some information. It says we need to navigate to /sev-phone/ to log in. Let's just open up a new tab and check that out. So, see, it was sev home. Okay, so this is bringing us to a login page, but we do not have any known credentials yet. So let's go back to the main page and do a little bit of digging. One of the things that I like to do with these CTF-style VMs is to always check the page source. So right-click somewhere and click View Page Source. Okay, there's nothing much to see here except terminal.js. So let's click that and see if there's anything interesting. Very good. I see a comment here saying, I encoded you password below. They meant your. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. This is an HTML encoded string. Just open another tab. I'm going to Google decode HTML. Just pick whatever comes up first. Paste that string. decode URL. Okay, we've recovered the plain text and his invincible hacker, so copy that. Now, aside from the password, another key piece of information from here is Boris. This is the person that they're referring to as far as their default password. So one can surmise that Boris is the username. So I'm going to use that. Go back here to sev home and try Boris and the password that we just recovered. Okay, we've gone through the authentication. Okay, so I'm reading this page here and it says that they have configured a POP3 service on a very high non-default port. We already know this because we ran an Nmap scan with all ports. I'll just check out this page's source. Type in view-source : Okay. Yeah, this is the same thing that we just saw. This is the video. Yeah, nothing to see here. So they mentioned POP3. Let's go see what's up with that service. First, open a terminal, and we're going to access it manually with Telnet. Telnet is a tool that can be utilized to attempt a direct network connection over any port. So type in Telnet, IP address of Goldeneye, 55007. As you recall from before, this is the port for POP3 that we discovered with Nmap. Okay, let's try to log in as Boris with the same password that we discovered in the web application. So user Boris, pass invincible hacker with 3. Okay, authentication failed. So it's not going to be that easy. Let's back out for now by typing quit. Okay, now that we know that Boris is a legitimate username, let's try Hydra. Hydra is a username and brute forcing tool that we can leverage to launch a dictionary attack against POP3, trying all passwords until either the correct password is found or the list is exhausted. We can try a small word list at first to see if we get lucky, and if that doesn't work, we can try some of the bigger ones. I'm just going to locate fasttrack.txt. There it is. It's a full path for it. Alright, now let's type out our Hydra command. So Hydra-L Boris, that's the username we're going to use, -P, full file path for fasttrack.txt, IP address of Goldeneye, -S, 55007, that's the port we're using, and POP3, that's the service. Okay, looks like we got lucky. Goldeneye has taken it easy on us and let us get in with the short password list. So we've successfully retrieved the password secret1 ! Now let's telnet into POP3 again with our newly acquired credentials and see what we can find. So user Boris, pass, and the password that we just got. Good. Now that we're logged in, let's see if there's any emails to read with the retrieve command. We can do so with retr1. Okay. Nothing to see here. retr2. Well, we see that there's a user Natalia, so that may be useful information for later. RETR3. Okay, I've read over all of Boris's emails, and the only thing that I found that's potentially useful is the username Natalia. And if you notice, it has the same domain as Boris, Ubuntu. So let's get out of this by typing in quit. I'm just going to press up on the keyboard a couple times, go back to our Hydra command, swap out the username Boris with Natalia. Hit enter. Let's try to brute force this one as well. Very good. We've cracked the password for Natalia. Telnet into POP3 again. User Natalia, pass bird. Okay. Let's retrieve the passwords with RETR1. Nothing here. RETR2. Okay. So we have some new credentials and instructions here. It says that we need to access their internal domain after modifying our local Etsy hosts file. So let's record that information and quit out of here. Actually, okay, there's no more email. So quit. First, let's make the necessary change to Etsy host. So open it in a text editor. I'm going to use V. So V Etsy hosts. Hit I on your keyboard to enter interactive mode. And we're going to enter the IP address of Goldeneye and severnaya-station.com. Hit escape to exit interactive mode. Hit :WQ to save and quit. Now let's go to Firefox. Alright, so I copied that URL from the email. I'm just going to paste it in here. Okay, we have this Moodle page, and we need to log in. So if you recall from the email from Natalia, they gave us a username and password. Just hit log in. It was Xenia, RPC, or RCP 90 rules, exclamation point. Alright, we're logged in. Let's just take a look here. I see down here, new message from Dr. Doak. Let's go to messages. Okay, after looking this page over, the only useful piece of information that I see is my email username is Doak. What does that tell you? We may be able to brute force that email as well. So let's go back to our terminal and use Hydra again. Alright, so I got the same exact Hydra command. The only change I made is the username is Doak. Perfect. We've again successfully brute forced the password. Let's log into Doak and see what else we can find. User Doak. Password goat. Retrieve 1. Okay, so the first email shows yet another set of credentials. Let's see if we have another one. Nope, just one email. Okay, so let's get those credentials and go back to the web application and log in with these. We got Dr._Doak and for England, exclamation point. Okay. check out the messages here. Nothing here, so what else do they have? My private files. Okay, secret.txt. Let's take a look at that. Alright. I was able to capture this app's admin creds through clear text. Text throughout most. Okay, something juicy is located here. It looks like a web directory. Alright, let's just copy that for now. Just open up another tab. I'm going to copy that web directory. Okay. It said something juicy is located here, so I can only guess that this has some sort of encoded message in it or something that we can use. So let's save it. Go back to a terminal. All right, change directory to the downloads folder here. And we have our 4007 JPEG file. And for analysis, I'm going to use EXIF tool, which is a collection of Perl modules used to read, write, and manipulate a variety of files, including images. So this can be used to analyze the JPEG file to see if there's any metadata. First, we have to get EXIF tool. So apt-get install EXIF tool. It's a brand new Kali box. We don't have everything installed yet, so we'll just download it as needed. Alright, so EXIF tool 4007.jpg. Let's take a look at each line very carefully. So, what do you see here that looks out of place or different than the rest? Right here, this is a base 64 encoded string. So after a while, you'll be able to spot this easily. If you're unfamiliar, the two equal signs at the end give it away. So this is easily decoded, and we can go ahead and do that from the command line. So copy that. Okay, so I'll type echo, backtick, echo, the base 64 encoded string. Pipe that to base 64 -- decode backtick. Now you didn't really need to do the backticks and all that. I just like to make a new line so it's a neat output. So there's the decoded string here, winter 1995. So let's grab that. Okay, back to the login page here on Firefox. I recall in the message it said that this was going to be the admin password. So let's just try admin and the password that I just copied. Very good. We're logged in as admin. Okay, first of all, we're logged into an application called Moodle, which is an open source learning platform. I've encountered this before in multiple CTF challenges, so I know where to look here. It's going to be in site administration, server, and environment. This is going to show us the version 2.2.3. Okay, so the next step would be to Google that version and exploit to see if there are any exploits related to this version. So Moodle 2.2.3 exploit. All right, here we go. Let's check the first one. It says 2.2.3 for Moodle, so sounds good to me. Moodle allows an authenticated user to define spell check settings, etc. Okay, so it says we can pop a shell as a unprivileged authenticated user. That's good. So let's see if we can leverage this exploit and get ourselves a shell. So here we have two options. I could use the Metasploit exploit module and automatically get a shell, which is great, or I could manually do it, which is what I want to do because I want to avoid using automated exploits and focus on manual exploitation and really understand how these exploit works, and I want to teach you how to do the same thing. So we're going to first need to modify the path to a spell, which is a spell checking mechanism in Moodle. What we're going to do is point to a reverse shell payload instead of the file path to a spell, which I'm going to show you now. Okay, so here we are in system paths, and here's the path to a spell. So this is what we need to overwrite with our reverse shell payload. And I like to use the ones from Pentest Monkey. So I'm going to open up another tab here and just type in Pentest Monkey shell. So we have our reverse shell cheat sheet site here. There's a collection of really good reverse shells that we can use for a variety of platforms. We're going to use the Python one. I find it to be very reliable. So just copy that. And you're going to have to change the IP address and port. So let's just go back to here. I'm going to copy all that and remove it, paste this, and I'm going to go over here where the IP address is. So IP address is going to be the IP address of Kali Linux. Port, whatever you want it to be. I'm just going to put 4444. Okay. Let me just show you what this looks like in a bigger text editor here. I'll wrap that. Okay, so that's what it looks like. So you have the IP address of Kali here and the port. That's the only thing you need to change. Everything else remains the same. Get out of that, and we'll go back here. Okay. One other small change I noticed that I had to make after trying a couple times and failing is that the plugins here we have to change. We have plugins, text editors, and tiny MCE HTML editor. So you have to make sure that this is P spell shell, because sometimes it'll be Google spell, which is going to not open up your reverse shell and your exploit is going to fail. So that's very important. Make sure that this is correct if you're having trouble getting your reverse shell, because this is necessary. Now let's set up a netcat listener. So nc-nlvp 4444. All this is going to do is set up a receiving connection with netcat, and it's going to be using a verbose output and port 4444. So set that up. Go back to your Moodle, and now we're just going to go to site pages, site blogs. You can open up any one of these, add a new entry. So it doesn't matter what you type in here. You probably don't have to type in anything. All you have to do is toggle spell checker. So I'm just going to look at this at the same time that I click spell checker. Once I do this, it's going to activate the reverse shell payload in Python, and it's going to cause the Goldeneye VM to initiate a connection back to Kali Linux, hence the word reverse shell. Well, that sounded real fancy, but it didn't work. Let's find out why. The IP address is correct. Okay, so I did not save the changes. that's a big deal. So let's just do that again, this time saving the changes. All right, everyone makes mistakes. So let's go back to site pages. Add new entry. Activate the spell checker. Okay, that time it worked. Now I want to use this Python code to spawn a TTY shell. Here it is. You'll have this in the lecture notes. Good. All right. So now the goal is to escalate privileges. Okay. So first thing I want to do is check uname-a. This shows us the version of Ubuntu Linux that we have, 3.13. So I'm just going to go back to Firefox, Google Ubuntu 3.13 privilege escalation. Okay. So the first hit we get is 37292 exploit. Looks like it's a directly exploitable C code that we're going to compile and run locally on our Goldeneye box. So let's go ahead and just view raw and copy all that text here. Open another terminal. We have two. And I'm going to change directories to /var/www/html. I'm going to be putting this file in the local web directory and then host Apache 2 so I can download this C code from Goldeneye. So open it up in the text editor. I'm just going to name it 37292.c and copy that text that we just, or paste the text we just copied. Save and quit. Now service Apache 2 start to host the web server on Kali Linux. Back to the Goldeneye limited shell. I'm going to change directories to /tmp. Now wget http / IP address of Kali Linux / 37292.c. Good. Grab the file. Now we're going to use GNU compiler for GCC 37292.c -o for output file name. Just going to name it 37292. Okay, so we do not have GCC installed. That's problematic. We're going to have to find an alternative method to compile this code in order to escalate our privileges. Okay. Okay, so we have CC, which is an alternative to GCC. Let's try to compile with that instead. Canned up on that. So CC, same command as GCC without the G. Okay. Let's try to run the compiled exploit. Okay, we have another problem here. It looks like the exploit itself requires GCC to function. So let's go back to Kali. Actually, let's delete all these. I'm just deleting all the exploits that we just got. Keep this shell open. Go back to Kali and let's investigate the issue here. open up the exploit code. Let's take a look. Let's go to the top. Now I want to do a string search for GCC. So /GCC. That's not it. That's a comment. Okay, this is actually in the code. So this is the command that it's trying to run after being compiled and running the executable. And it is not going to work because GCC is not available in Goldeneye. So it's going to remove that G. See if there's any more in here that need to be changed. Oops. Nope, that's the only one. So save that. And let's ship it back over to over here. We have this wget command. I'm just going to copy it over. Okay. There it is. So now let's try our cc compile again. So cc, name of the file, output. Just name it the same thing as before. And now it should work, hopefully. Okay, looks promising. Root. All right. Let's go to root folder. No flag here. Let's see. ls-lah. Okay, yeah, there is a flag. It's just hidden. So cat. There we go. All right, we're done here. Let's move on to the next one. This video will cover the enumeration and exploitation of the intentionally vulnerable Linux VM Raven 1. The goal of this CTF challenge is to gain root access and acquire 4 flags which are hidden in various parts of the file system. You can download Raven 1 from VulnHub or get it from my Google Drive. As with all of my lectures, relevant URLs and commands used are contained within a text file that's attached to the lecture. Double-click the Raven 1 OVA file, which will open up VirtualBox Manager. Once it's booted, change the network settings to host only real quick, and let's get started with enumeration. So I'll just make sure that we have host only configured on the network settings for the VM. Looks good to me. Click Start. Wait until it boots up and switch over to your Kali Linux VM once it's booted. As I explained in the previous lab, what we're going to do is find the IP address by using the netdiscover command. -i, eth1 being the host-only interface. Let that run, find the IP address. Okay, got the IP. I'm going to kill that. Now let's use Nmap to enumerate the services. Nmap -p, all the ports, -a, and the IP address. I've already explained what all this does. You can go back to the previous lecture if you forgot or didn't do the one yet previous to this. Okay, as you can see, we have discovered port 22, which is SSH, port 80, which is Apache web server, and RPC on these 2 ports here. So the first thing that I want to check is port 80. And let's try to access that directly with Firefox. So minimize this, open up Firefox. http:// IP address of the target, which is Raven 1. Okay, first thing I like to do is right-click, view page source. Okay, I see that they're running WordPress. Just looking over the HTML here, see if there's anything interesting. Okay, other than the fact that it's running WordPress, I don't see anything interesting here. So let's go back to the main page. We have a couple more pages here. About us. Let's check that out. Okay, let's check the other one. Service. Okay, we found a flag here. Flag 1. That's good. Okay, after scrutinizing the web application, all I see so far is the flag, which is not particularly helpful. It's just a finding. And then we have WordPress over here. So let's click WordPress. Okay, so here's the location of WordPress. Just copy that, and we're going to use that, and we're going to scan the service with WP Scan, which is a standalone scanner specifically for WordPress to see if we can enumerate and brute force user accounts or find any obvious vulnerabilities. So let's go back to the terminal. Clear this out. Okay, so we're going to use WP Scan --URL, the target, --, enumerate, U, which is users, --, force, --, WP content, -dir, WP content. Okay, so what this does is going to run a WordPress scan against Raven 1, enumerating users if possible, and I'm manually setting the WP content dir to WP content, as that's the default. I'm going to set the force directive to just make sure that there's no issues for students using the scanner. Basically, it makes it trust that WordPress is installed and doesn't do the checking. So let's go ahead and run that, hit enter. Okay, so we've identified 2 users, Michael and Stephen. Armed with this new information, let's run a brute force dictionary attack and try to crack their passwords. We can use WP Scan for this purpose. This took me quite a while to run, so for the course, I'm just going to use the username Stephen because that's the one that worked for me. Let's clear this out. I'm going to make a file named username. I'm going to put the username Stephen inside of it. Okay, so what this command does is uses a password file of fasttrack.txt and the username file, actually I misspelled that. You just saw me make that. It just has the username Stephen in it. So when I originally did this, I had a password list of rocku.txt, which is massive, and I had tried a username list of Michael and Stephen, and that took hours. So I'm just going to show you this for proof of concept, but that's how I originally got the password cracked. And also it has multi-threading enabled with 25 threads, which significantly speeds up the process. So let's just go ahead and run that. Okay, so we've cracked the password, pink84, and like I said, pink84 was appended to the end of fasttrack.txt. I originally found it with rocky.txt. Anyway, there are a couple ways we can get a shell here. The easiest way, which I discovered after the arduous WordPress authentication brute force, is the other username over SSH, which was Michael. I just tried Michael with a password of Michael and got right in. But since we already did all that hard work to get Steven's password, let's SSH in with that. Oh, Steven. IP address of Raven 1. And the password was pink84. Okay, we are in. So, privilege escalation here was very easy. Just sudo -l, check the sudo privileges that Steven has. Now, we can run the following commands on Raven, which is the Python command. Now, there are plenty of ways you can get a shell here. What I'm going to do is just run the Python command that I always run to upgrade to a TTY shell. It's just going to give us a root shell right off the bat. There we go. Let's check the root directory. Here's a flag. All right. So there's two more flags hidden somewhere in the VM. I'm going to let you find them on your own. Also, there's an alternative method to discover Steve's password that's way easier than brute forcing WordPress, and I'm going to let you figure that on your own as well. So, to give you a hint, thorough enumeration is the key. This video will cover the enumeration and exploitation of Raven 2, which is obviously part 2 of the previous lab walked through Raven 1. You can get this from VulnHub or my Google Drive. As mentioned in the previous labs, relevant URLs and commands used are attached to each lecture. Double-click the OVA file, change the network settings to host only, and let's get started. So quick recap, you right-click, go to Settings, Network, make sure it's the same host-only adapter as your Kali Linux box. Okay, go to Kali Linux, open up a terminal, and you'll notice that the initial enumeration is always similar at the beginning. We're going to hit it with net discover. Okay, now that we have the IP, we're going to enumerate services with Nmap. So Nmap-p-a, IP address of Raven 2. As you can see from Nmap's output, we have SSH running on port 22, Apache web server running on port 80, and RPC running on ports 111 and 47364. The most interesting one to me is the Apache web server, so that's what we're going to look at first. Before going straight to the website, let's run an automated scan. We have Dirb, which is going to brute force directly accessible web directories, and we're going to use the default word list for that, so I'll show you how that works. Type in Dirb, http:// and the IP address of Raven 2. Okay, see it's running WordPress. There you go right there, WordPress. Let's go back up. Okay, I see this file vendor, or this web directory here. Let's take a look at that. So just right click and open it with Firefox. Alright, let's take a look at some of these files here. We have license, looks like a default license, nothing to see here. We have path, Alright, looks like that is the internal file path within Raven 2 for this web directory that we're in, vendor. And we also have our first flag. Just remember that information. And now we have PHP mailer. So that is running on Raven 2. That's a service that could be potentially vulnerable. Let's skip down to version here. Okay, so that's the version of PHP mailer, 5.2.16. So now that we know that it's running PHP mailer and we know the version, let's Google to see if there are any vulnerabilities inherent in that particular version of PHP mailer. So just open up another tab, PHP mailer 5.2.16 exploit. That's what I'm going to search for. Alright, so it looks like we have some RCE involved. Okay, so I'm just going to click the first one we have here, 40974. So we have some Python code here. Okay, I'm just going to click View Raw, select all, copy that. Let's go to a terminal real quick. Okay, with your terminal open, type in VI. I'm going to name the file 40974.py. And we're just going to paste that Python code in there and jump to the top. Okay, so I see right here that we have some non-ASCII characters and we don't have an encoding declared at the top. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So coding :UTF-8 should take care of that problem. Down. Now I'm going to change the target. It's going to be the IP address of Raven 2. Also, we're going to have to specify the location contact.php. This is the location that's going to be exploited in PHP mailer. I'm just going to change the name of the backdoor file that's going to be uploaded. Just name it shells. Down to payload. I have the IP address here. It's going to have to be changed to the IP address of Kali Linux. This is a reverse shell payload. And also, I'm just going to keep the port number 4444. Okay, one last thing here. Looks like we need to change this to the full internal file path of the web directory for Raven 2. We found that information in that path file in the vendor web directory. So that was var/www.html, and change this name here to the backdoor that we declared up top to shells.php. Everything looks good. So we should be able to run this and upload that shells.php reverse shell into Raven 2 and then go to that directly and acquire a reverse shell. So let's make sure that that works. Before running the Python script, there's one thing we need to do. We need to get requests toolbelt, which is a dependency for the Python script. So pip3 install requests_toolbelt. I already have it installed because I did it earlier, but this is the command that you have to run. You'll likely not have it just with a new Kali VM. Now let's run the command. Python 3, very important, otherwise it won't work. And the name of the Python script. Okay, if everything works properly, we should be able to set up a netcat listener and go to that shells.php file and get a reverse shell. So first, just nc-nlvp4444. That's the port that we specified in the Python script. All right, just minimize that a little bit. So we go here, try to visit shells.php. Very good. You see here, we got our limited shell. I'm just going to use a quick Python code to upgrade that to a TTY shell. Very good. Alright, so our next mission is to get privilege escalation. Let's just go to the bar file here. Backups might be good. Look at that later. So we have our next flag here, flag2.txt. Oop. Okay, got our next flag. Let's keep going. Alright, so we have a WordPress directory here. Alright, so we've come across a wp-config.php file. And from my past experience, these configuration files contain credentials sometimes. So let's look through them real quick manually. I'm just going to cat this file here, wp-config.php. Alright, we found some MySQL database credentials here, root and Raven security. So let's just document that information and move on. Now let's grab a Python script called Linux Priv Checker. This is going to help us automatically enumerate Raven 2 and see if there's any known exploits that'll help us locally escalate privileges. So you can grab it from GitHub. I'm going to have this URL in the text document attached to this lecture. Just going to view raw, copy all this text here. I'm going to go to the web root for local Kali Linux. We're going to be wgetting this from Raven 2. So just name it linuxprivchecker.py. Copy that Python code into there and save it. Now start Apache 2. Okay, back to our limited shell. I'm going to go to the temp directory. Now just wget IP address of Kali Linux and the Linux priv checker.py. Okay. Now let's run that Python script. So I want you to check out all the results of this script output, but here at the bottom, we're going to see a user-defined function local privilege escalation exploit for MySQL. Now, I know that this has a high success rate because I've used it in the past, and we have the root password for MySQL. So let's check that out. Just right-click that and open the link, and we have this C code here. So view raw and copy that C code. Back to the shell here, put it in your Kali Linux web root. Alright, so in our Kali Linux web root, I'm going to create a new file named 1518.c. We're going to paste that C code in there that we just copied from exploitdb, save that. Now we're going to compile this on Kali Linux because it is not going to work if we try to compile it in Raven 2. I tried earlier. So here's the GCC command that we need to use in order to compile 1518.c. It's going to create a file named 1518.so. Okay. So this is the file that we're going to have to bring over to Raven 2. Alright, back to the limited shell, we're going to get our .so file. So wget IP address of Kali Linux and the 1518.so file. Good. Now let's log into MySQL with the root credentials that we acquired earlier from that config file. MySQL-u root-p, and enter in that password. It was Raven security. Good, logged in. Now we need to execute a series of commands in order to escalate our privileges. It's going to create some MySQL database changes, and then we're going to escalate our privileges to root. So I'll show you how that works now. Okay, change to the MySQL database. And we're going to create some tables and insert some values into it. You may notice that I already have some of these tables. That's because I already tested this prior to recording, but these commands are going to be included in the text file attached to this lecture. I'm just going to redo them just to show you how it works. See, we're going to be utilizing that 15.18 or 1518.so file. So you will not be seeing these same errors. Okay, so that's all there is to it. Exit out of this. Alright, so how this works is really cool. So we touch pwned, we're making a file named pwned. Now we're going to use the find command, which we can execute with root privileges. Find pwned -exec. We're going to execute the command whoami. As you can see here, the results says root. That means we executed the whoami command as root. So if we can do that, we should be able to execute bin.sh as root as well. What will that do? Well, let's see. Spawns a root shell. So now we have root privileges. Let's go to the root directory. Yep. There's the fourth flag. Okay, so at this point, we've accomplished privilege escalation to root and found 3 flags. I'm going to let you find the last one on your own. Remember, thorough enumeration is key. Lampiao is another intentionally vulnerable Linux VM which we'll be enumerating and exploiting. As with all the others, the goal is to get an interactive root shell on the target. To acquire this VM, you can get it on VulnHub or download it from my Google Drive. So get started, double-click the OVA file, and make sure that the network settings are changed to host only. And let's get started with enumeration. Alright, everything looks good. Let's start up Lampiao. Okay, on to Kali Linux. As with all the other CTF challenges, we'll find the IP address with netdiscover. Alright, now we have the IP address. Here it is. Let's cancel out of that. Use Nmap to enumerate the services. Same as all the other ones. It's a command right there. Okay, from the Nmap results, we have SSH running on port 22, Apache web server running on port 80, and another Apache web server running on 1898. So the one that interested me the most is the one on 1898, as it's a non-standard port, and it's also running Drupal, so let's go check that out over a web browser. Open up Firefox now. Alright, we're going to hit the IP address of Lampiao, and we got the port number, 1898. Okay, we have some sort of blog here. Submitted by Eater. Okay, we have also Tiago. Those are potential usernames, so let's remember that. Let's check this out. Alright, so we have some blog here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce a neat tool called Cool, which basically harvests words from websites and transforms them into a word list that can be used for brute force attacks. We're going to take the usernames Tiago and Eater that we saw earlier, and we're going to generate a word list and try to brute force SSH with Hydra, because we saw earlier with Nmap that SSH is open. So open up a terminal now. Okay, now we're creating the custom word list with cool, so CEWL. And here's the location of the blog that we're just looking at. And I'm going to write it to a file, --write, and then name it wordlist.txt. Alright, that was done very quickly. Now we're going to use Hydra. So Hydra-L, Tiago, that's one of the usernames that we discovered, -p, wordlist.txt, and the IP address of Lampiao, and specify the service as SSH. Very good. We've brute forced the password. It's this right here, Virgulino. So let's go ahead and log in as Tiago at the IP address of Lampiao. Password Virgulino. Very good. Now we need to escalate privileges. Now I'm going to introduce you to a shell script called Linux Exploit Suggester. Now, this is going to automatically enumerate the operating system of Lampiao and check for known privilege escalation techniques. So, let's go over here to Firefox. I'm going to grab Linux Exploit Suggester from GitHub. We're going to clone that, so just click clone, copy that URL here. Get a new tab. I'm going to go to the web root of Kali Linux, type in git clone, and copy that URL that you got from GitHub. Good. Here it is. I'm just going to move it back one so I can get a little easier. So just using the move command to put it back one directory in the web root. Okay, so let's turn on Apache web server on Kali Linux. So service Apache 2 start. Now let's ship it over to Lampiao. So back to your limited shell. Okay. Change directories to temp. Now we're going to wget IP address of Kali Linux and Linux exploit suggester.sh. Okay, we got it. Now we're gonna chmod plus x, that's gonna make it executable. Linux exploit suggester.sh. Now let's run it. Okay. Alright, I see Dirty Cow. In my experience, that's been very reliable. Let's see which kind. We have a couple Dirty Cows here. Okay, so I've tried both of these Dirty Cows offline, and neither one of them worked. However, this one right here, the 40847, does work. Now, this link does not exist anymore, so I'm going to just copy that 40847.cpp, go to Google, type that in, and exploit db. There it is. See, it's different. It's exploits instead of download, so just grab it here. Alright, so view raw. Copy all that text. We're going to go to our terminal. Go to your web root. Create a file 40847 .c. Copy all that text. Actually, it's going to be CPP because it's C++, so move that over. 4847.cpp. There we go. There it is. Now we're going to ship that over. Alright, back to our limited shell and SSH on Lampiao. So wget, IP address of Cali, and the name of the file that we just created. Alright. Now we need to use G++ to compile this exploit. Here's the command. All the commands and URLs are attached as a text file to this lecture. Alright, good. Now let's try this exploit. It's called decal, so ./decal. Alright, so it's telling us that the root password was changed to dirty cow fun. Let's try to sudo root and see if we can actually get to root. Alright, so type in su root. Just pop in that password there. Very good. Quick and easy. We've logged in as root. There's a flag here. Okay, we're done here. Let's go on to the next one. This video will show you how to enumerate and exploit DerpnStink, another intentionally vulnerable Linux VM. The objective is to obtain root access and collect several flags which are hidden throughout the system. You can get this VM from VulnHub or my Google Drive page. Links and commands are contained within a text file attached to this lecture. Download it and double-click it to launch in VirtualBox Manager, change the network settings to host only, start it, and let's get to work. Okay, looks good. Start it up. Okay, jump on your Kali Linux box, open up a terminal, and the first step as usual is to find the IP address. We're going to use NetDiscover. Okay, we have the IP address. Now let's use Nmap to enumerate services. We have 3 services discovered here. SSH over port 22, Apache web server over port 80, and FTP over port 21. Let's check out port 80 over the web browser. Okay, we have Firefox open. Just the IP address of Derp. Okay, so I just click the top here, view page source. Okay, we have web notes info.txt. I'm just going to open that in another tab. It says here we need to update our host file with the local DNS of DerpnStink. It's probably something we need to do later, so let's remember that. Scroll down a bit. We have our first flag here in the HTML. Okay, next step, we're going to run Dirb to see if we can brute force any web directories that are directly accessible. So minimize this and go to a terminal. To run the Dirb scan, type Dirb, http:// and the IP address of Derp. Okay, I noticed that web directory weblog that was mentioned earlier when we looked at that info.txt file. So let's try to open that. Just right click, open link. Okay, see, it's trying to resolve to this domain DerpnStink.local weblog. So we have to do what they said earlier. So just copy that. We're going to add that to the etc host file. So minimize that. I'm just going to make another terminal open here. So let's open etc hosts with a text editor. I'm using V. I'm just going to make a new entry here. IP address of Derp. And we have the domain here. Let's remove that. Good. Save that. Now let's see if we can access that. Go back to your web browser. Very good. So now it's working properly. Okay, now I'm going to right click, view page source. Okay, looks like it's running WordPress 4.6.9. So now that we know it's running WordPress, let's run a WP scan to see if we can enumerate any users or any vulnerabilities that we can exploit. So back to your terminal. Okay, so WP scan --URL http:// DerpnStink.local /weblog --enumerate. We're going to enumerate the users and plugins. Okay, at the bottom here, I see that we have a bunch of XSS and other vulnerabilities before that, which is fine, but we want to find a way to get an interactive shell. Now, the most pertinent vulnerability here is the slideshow gallery arbitrary file upload vulnerability. So if we can get some way to log in, we can leverage that vulnerability to get a shell. Let's go down to the bottom here. I see we have users admin and Uncle Stinky. So we're going to try to brute force the admin user first. Now I'm just going to make a file with the username admin inside of it. So echo double quote admin double quote redirect to a file named admin. Now we're going to use WP scan again. This time we're going to use it to brute force the admin user. So WP scan --URL, same one as before. --passwords. We're going to use this password list called Fast Track. It's about 200 passwords. --usernames and the admin file that we just created. -T, enable multi-threading, and we're going to use 25 threads. So let's use that command now. Okay, we've brute forced the password, but it looks like we didn't really need to because we could have guessed it easily. It's admin. So it's usually not going to be that easy. So it's a good thing to know how to brute force it if you have to. So let's open up Firefox, log into the admin panel, and see if we can get some arbitrary file uploads going. And we know that exists because we saw the version of the slideshow gallery plugin. First step, we're going to grab a PHP shell. You can use whatever you want, but I'm going to get the one from Pentest Monkey. I'll show you where that's at too. Okay, if you're wondering where I found the login panel for WordPress, it's right here in the Dirb output. We have /weblog wp-admin. So before we go there, let's go ahead and open up Firefox. And we're going to go to pentestmonkey.net to grab that PHP reverse shell. So I'm just going to download it here. Save it. I'm going to go to the download location. and just extract it here. So it's going to be in the downloads folder. Okay. Now we need to make some slight changes to it before we use it. Okay, so back to your terminal, cd downloads, and go to the PHP reverse shell directory. There it is. So we're going to just open that in a text editor and go down a little bit. So just make a couple changes here. The IP address, that is going to be the IP address that is going to connect back to your Kali Linux box. So it's going to be the Kali Linux IP address. And the port, I'm just going to change it to 4444. Should be good. Save that. Now let's go to the login panel. So open up Firefox now. So I'm just going to duplicate tab. It was wp-admin. Alright. So as we know, the password is admin. So username admin, password admin, log in. Very good. So now we're going to have to set up a malicious slideshow. And we're going to use our reverse shell to connect back to Kali Linux. Before doing that, let's just set up a netcat listener. So open terminal, nc-nlvp 4444. That's the port that was specified in the reverse shell code, PHP file. Okay, so you click in slideshow, add new slide. You see we have the option to choose an image. So we're going to browse to our PHP code, which is in the downloads folder, PHP reverse shell. Save slide. So as soon as I save that slide, I got a reverse shell. Very good. Now I'm going to run some quick Python code to spawn a TTY shell like I usually do. Good. Let's take a look at the files we can access. We're in root directory, okay. Let's go to var www HTML. Okay, I see the weblog directory. I want to go there. That's where WordPress is installed. So I see some configuration files. That's good. Let's take a look at those. The wp-config.php file. I'm used to finding credentials in there. All right. So we have root MySQL as the database password. All right. So let's go back to our Dirb output real quick. I want to show you something. Okay, so in the Dirb output, I noticed this PHP myadmin page. Let's go there real quick. So right click, open link. Now we just found some credentials from for MySQL in the wp-config file. So let's see if they work here. It was root MySQL. All right, very good. Now we're in. Let's look around for anything useful, hopefully credentials to get some privilege escalation in our limited shell. Okay, first I'm going to expand WordPress. I see WP users. Okay, here are some password hashes. You may notice that the hashes are the same. That's because I made some changes offline to make sure it works, but I could have done two things here. The hard way is to crack the password for Uncle Stinky with John the Ripper or Hashcat. However, I already know the password for admin, which is admin, so I copied the hash and pasted it into Uncle Stinky's user pass entry. This effectively changed the password to admin. So now we have the access to Uncle Stinky's account as well. Okay, now I'm expanding MySQL. Go to user. Alright, here I see some passwords that are hashed in MD5, looks like. We already have the password for root, so we don't have to worry about that. Let's go to Uncle Stinky. This is his WordPress account. So just copy that. I'm going to open up crackstation.net. Just paste that hash here. Click I'm not a robot. Make a little captcha here. Okay. Click crack hashes. Okay, now we have recovered the plain text of the password, wedgie57. So let's just document that. Okay, you should remember that we have FTP open on Dirb, which we can access over the web browser. So let's try getting that. That was from the Nmap scan earlier. So FTP : / IP address of Dirb. And we have these new credentials, so let's try those out. It was Uncle Stinky and wedgie57. Okay, that's not working. Alright, let's go to the limited shell and see if we can see any other usernames. I have a command here, cat etc password. It's just going to show us the contents of the etc password file. Okay, I see there is a user, Stinky. So let's try that user. Back to FTP. Now we're going to try username Stinky and the password wedgie57. Okay, good. Now we're in. Let's investigate these files. We have network logs. Okay, this is a text file. Looks like a conversation between the two users. It says I accidentally deleted an account, need to log on. And he says he's going to packet capture. So that indicates that we may need to find some pcap file. So remember that. Okay. Let's go back. I have to click through a bunch of directories here. Okay, so I have a key.txt file. This is a private key for SSH. That's going to allow us to log in, hopefully. I'm going to try user Stinky, because that's the one we're logged in as. So, let's try that now. We'll open up a terminal. Let's open up a new one here. Okay, I'm just going to make a new file named key and paste that private key in, save it. Now we'll change the permissions of that file so we can use it with SSH, chmod 700 key. Now SSH Stinky at IP address of Dirb -i key. This will use that key file, the private key, to log in as Stinky with that SSH key. Okay, great. We're logged in. So we have user privileges at this point, but we still need to escalate privileges to root. Okay, so let's look around real quick. Go to desktop. Okay, we have a flag here. Flag 3, good. Okay, can't get to root. Alright, so based on the conversation we read earlier in the FTP files, I believe that there's a pcap that needs to be analyzed in order to go further. Let's check the file system with the locate command for .pcap file extensions. So just locate *.pcap. Okay, great. Okay, at this point you have two options. You can either use TCP dump right here, which was what I want to do, is what I'm going to do, or you could ship the pcap file to Kali Linux and use Wireshark. I prefer TCP dump because you don't have to rely on the GUI. It's faster, and I like using grep, and I like using command line. So that's what I'm going to do now. Just type in TCP dump -NNTTTTAR, name of the pcap file, pipe to less. So what this command does is basically it tells TCP dump not to translate ports, changes the format of the time, reads the pcap file, and pipes it to less for more manageability. So let's run that. All right. So you see these carriage returns? I don't like that, so I'm going to just quit out of that and do -SR. It's going to get rid of those. Okay, so let's take a look here. It's probably a big pcap file. Okay, so instead of manually looking at this pcap line by line, which would be extremely inefficient, I'm going to recall the conversation which was had in the text file we found over FTP. They said that they were trying to log into something, probably over port 80. So let's narrow the results down to port 80 and use grep to search for the string pass, which is a common parameter for HTTP authentication. So I'm going to close out of this, press up to go back to this command. Now we're going to specify port 80, pipe that to grep, and search for the string pass. I'm also going to use -C. This is going to specify for grep to go search for lines 20 above and 20 below the pattern match of pass. Also, I'm going to use a color match. So color equals always. It's going to color the pattern match of pass. Okay? So that's all we need to do. All right. Good. Here we go. Here's a post. To add a user, we have the pass parameter, pass1 equals, and here it is. Here's our password. And that is for user login Mr. Derp. Okay? So, if you thought that TCP dump command was pretty complicated, it might be at first, but after using TCP dump for my whole career, it's become second nature to me. I'm actually thinking of making a TCP dump course. Please let me know if you think that's a good idea. Anyway, let's take that password and see what we can do with it. So we have user Mr. Derp, so let's try to switch user to Mr. Derp. And we have that long password that we just found in the pcap file, so I'm just going to paste that in there. Okay. Maybe I pasted that incorrectly. Let me try again. Okay. That time it worked. I pasted it incorrectly. So we have that Mr. Derp and that long derp password. That let us go switch user to Mr. Derp. Let's try to go to root. No, we do not have root privileges, so we still need to escalate our privileges to root. Okay, let's check out the sudo privileges of Mr. Derp. So sudo -l. Supply that password. Okay. So it looks like Mr. Derp can run commands as root as long as they're in this folder here. Home, Mr. Derp, binaries, and anything that is started with the name Derpy. Okay? So let's try going to that location. No such file or directory, so what we're going to have to do is create that. So, Mr. Derp, binaries. Now what I'm going to do is create a shell script and put it in that folder, naming it derpy. That should allow me to execute that shell script as root. And the shell script is going to be very simple. I'm just going to use the command bin bash, and that should spawn a root shell for me. So let's try that. Okay, first I'm just going to change directories to home Mr. Dirb, binaries. Now let's create the file. I'm just going to echo bin bash into a file named derpy.sh. Now just chmod plus x derpy.sh. That's going to give it executable permissions. Now we should be able to sudo and run this shell script to get a root shell. So let's do sudo /derpy.sh. Perfect. We're now logged in as root. Just go to the root directory. Go to the desktop. Okay, there's a flag. All right, we've accomplished escalating privileges to root. Now there's 2 more flags left, but I'll let you find those on your own. On to the next one. Stapler is an intentionally vulnerable Linux VM authored by GotMilk, who consistently creates stellar pentesting content. This VM is interesting because there are 2 different ways to get shells with limited privileges, and 3 different ways to get root access. We're only going to cover one way to enumerate and exploit this VM, but I highly encourage you to find all of the other ways on your own. Download this VM from VulnHub or from my Google Drive, double-click the OVA file to open it in VirtualBox, make sure the network settings are set to host only, and let's get down to business. Open up a terminal in your Kali Linux VM, and as usual, let's use NetDiscover to find the IP of our target. Now that we have the IP address, let's get to enumerating services with Nmap. Okay, so what you can see from the Nmap results, we have ports 20 and 21 open, which are both related to FTP, SSH over port 22, DNS over port 53, some sort of web server over port 80, port 123, which has NTP, NetBIOS over ports 137, 138, and 139, some custom service over port 666, and MySQL over 3306. Let me go down a little bit so you can see that. There it is. We also have an Apache web server over 12380. Big attack surface here. It's hard to figure out which one to attack first, but I'm going to start with FTP. So I'm just going to minimize that and start a new window here, new terminal. Okay, since this is a brand new Kali Linux box, we're going to have to install FTP. So apt-get install FTP. Once that's installed, FTP, IP address of Stapler. Okay, so let's try anonymous login. So just anonymous and anonymous for the credentials. Good. All right. That's a common thing in CTF challenges for anonymous login to be enabled. So let's see what we have here. We have one file named note. So just get note to download that to Kali. I'm going to quit out of that. Okay, let's read the contents of that file note by catting it. Alright, looks like a note from someone named Ellie to John, telling them to update payload information. And now we have 2 potential usernames, Ellie and John, so just document that and let's move forward. Next thing I want to do is to check out that Apache web server over the non-standard port. So let's go ahead and check that out. Actually, I'm going to try to run a Derby scan against that to see if we can brute force any of the web directories. So let's just go back to the Nmap scan results here. Check out that port number is 12380. Go back to this. Okay, Dirb scan it. IP address of stapler and that port that we found, 12380. Just let that run. Okay, so we didn't find anything with Dirb. That's disappointing, but let's try it with HTTPS and see if we get any different results. Okay, immediately I see it's finding a bunch of stuff. Great. Let's just let that run. Okay, let's take a look at some of this stuff. We have a phpMyAdmin location here. That's a login page. And we have robots.txt. Let's just take a look at that real quick. Just add that exception there. Okay, so I have two other web directories. I'm just going to duplicate the tab and check those out real quick. Alright, so that just redirected us to this XSS payloads website. I'll go back, go to blog. Okay. Initech, that's from Office Space. Let's see. Powered by WordPress. Alright, so it's running WordPress. Let's see if we can use WP scan, see if we can enumerate any users or find any vulnerabilities that we can use. Okay, so we have a terminal open, WP scan --URL. There's the URL for the WordPress location for stapler, and I'm going to enumerate users and all plugins. And I'm also going to set disable TLS checks. Otherwise, it will not work. So run that command. Alright, so let's take a look at these results here. We have this upload directory. I'm going to copy that. That's something I want to look at. Let's just go down. See a bunch of XSS vulnerabilities. That's not really going to help us, though, in terms of getting a shell. Let's go to the bottom here. No plugins found, ton of users. Okay, so let's go to that uploads directory that WP scan found. So go over to Firefox. Alright, I'm just going to go to the parent directory. There's a plugins folder here. Okay, I see that it has advanced video embed, which was missed by the WordPress scanner. I'm just going to Google to see if there are any vulnerabilities within that plugin. Okay, so let's just open a new tab here. Type in advanced video embed exploit. Alright, the exploit database has shown us that we have a local file inclusion exploit here. It's some Python code. Very good. So let's just view that in raw and copy all that. I'm going to make a Python file in Kali. So back to your terminal. Okay, so let's create a file. I'm going to name it 39646.py. Just paste that code right in there. :0. I'm going to jump to the top. Okay, there's a couple of changes we need to make. First of all, import SSL. We need to be able to support a connection over HTTPS, which is why we need to do that. And also, there is a line that has to be added, as so. That'll allow us to connect using HTTPS. And now we have to specify the correct target, which is going to be the stapler box over the non-standard port. So stapler IP over HTTPS 123.80 is the port. Blog. Okay, that should be everything we need in order to make this exploit work. Save that. Okay, so let me explain what this exploit does real quick. It leverages LFI to get the wp-config.php file from the local file system where WordPress is installed and upload it as a JPEG to the wcontent/uploads directory. So let's go ahead and make sure that this works. So Python and the name of the exploit. Okay, at least it connected. Now let's go over to the uploads directory and see if we have our JPEG file as expected. Okay, I just reopened Firefox and I'm going to refresh that page. Awesome, here it is. So let's download that. Oops, just right click, save link as, save the JPEG. Now I'm going to go back to the terminal, go to the downloads folder, and we're just going to cat that JPEG. Gives us the contents of that file, the wp-config.php file. Alright, so we have some MySQL database credentials here, root, and here's the password. So write those down and let's move forward, see if we can use those. Okay, if we've learned anything from the other CTF challenges, we know that credentials are often used in multiple places. I recall that the phpMyAdmin login panel was discovered with brute forcing the web directories with Dirb. So let's just open that real quick and see if the credentials work there. So we have Firefox open. I'm going to type in the IP address of stapler over HTTPS, the non-standard port, and phpMyAdmin. Get to that login location. And now let's use those credentials that we took earlier from the wp-config.php file. So root, the password was plbkac. Alright, perfect. Now we have access to phpMyAdmin. If you're familiar with this web application, we're able to execute MySQL. We can use this functionality to create a PHP file that will allow us to execute arbitrary code. So I'm going to show you how that works now. Click SQL. Here's where you can run your SQL queries. So I'm just going to paste this simple code here. So select this code, it's PHP, into this file, which is going to be in this directory here, and name the file shell.php. It's going to allow us to execute commands. Okay, so once you have that in, click go. Okay, good. Executed the SQL query. Now let's go back to the uploads directory, make sure that the file was created. Okay, I'm just going to reload the page. Good, here it is, shell.php. So now, let's test it out. Just type in shell.php, $cmd equals, and we're going to try the hostname command, see if we get results back. Good, so as you can see here, we've executed the hostname command and it's returned red.initech. So if we're able to do that, that means that we should probably be able to use one of these reverse shell payloads to get a reverse shell. So let's try Pentest Monkey's reverse shell and see if we can get a connection back with Netcat. So first of all, just open up a terminal here and type in nc-nlvp. I'm going to use the port 4444. Let me just show you in LeafPad the payload that we're going to be using right here. So IP address of Kali Linux and the port number that you're using. This is mine, so just close that. I'm going to replace the hostname command with this Python reverse shell payload. Very good, here we go. We have our reverse shell. Okay, by now you should know the next step is going to be privilege escalation. We need to get root. So let's take a look at the operating system type. So we got lsb_release-a. All right, it's running Ubuntu 16.04. So let's go ahead and jump to Google and see if there's any known exploits for this for privilege escalation. I'm just going to type in Ubuntu 16.04 privilege escalation. All right. So I recognize this one here, 39772, which has worked for me in the past for Ubuntu 16.04. So let's try that one. Okay, so this explains how the exploit works, but you actually have to go to this page in order to get the necessary files. So open that in a new tab. And we're going to go down to the bottom here where we need to download exploit.tar and crasher.tar. So download both of those, save them. All right, now just go to another terminal and we're going to go to the downloads folder where they were just saved, and we need to move them to the web directory in Kali because we're going to wget them on stapler. So move, I'm just going to do star.tar var www html. It's going to move both those files over there to the web directory. We do not have to extract them yet. We're going to do that on stapler. So back to your limited shell. Actually, first of all, we need to go back to Kali, type in service apache 2 start. This will allow us to use wget to get those files that we just put in the web directory in Kali. Okay, so change directory to temp. Now we're going to wget those files. IP address of Kali Linux, file name exploit.tar, and we also have to wget the other file, crasher.tar. All right. Now we're going to use the tar command. So I'm going to extract these files, tar xvf exploit.tar, and do the same thing for the other one, tar-xvf crasher.tar. Okay. Now I'm going to change directory into one of the folders that was created. And now I need to make executable compile.sh. Same thing for, actually that should be it. So now we're going to run compile.sh. Okay. Now double put should be the file that we need to execute to get root privileges. So /double put. Let that run. Everything works properly. We are going to get a root shell. Okay, after a little bit of time, it should say that we have root privileges. Let's just try a command. There we go. We have root privileges. I'm just going to run this little Python code to give us a shell. There we go. Go to the root folder. Here's a flag. Very good. Now that was just one of the methods to get a low privilege and a root shell. There are many others, as I mentioned earlier. Try all of them on your own. Good luck. This video will cover the enumeration and exploitation of VulnOS 2, which is another intentionally vulnerable Linux VM. You can download it at VulnHub or from my Google Drive. After you've downloaded it and extracted it, double-click the VBox file to open it in VirtualBox Manager. Now a couple small configuration changes should be made. So right-click VulnOS, Settings. Just make sure that you're running on your host-only adapter so you can communicate with Kali Linux. Now this is important. This USB setting here, uncheck it. Otherwise you won't be able to start up the VM. So click OK. Yeah, that's nothing. Click Start. Should have no errors, and we're good to go. Over to your Kali Linux box and get started. Now let's get the IP address with NetDiscover. Okay, got the IP address. Now let's run an Nmap scan as usual. The results of the Nmap scan show that we have port 22 running SSH, port 80 running Apache web server, and port 6667 running IRC. What interests me the most here is the Apache web server over port 80, so let's hit that with the web browser real quick. Now open up Firefox, IP address of VulnOS. Okay, nothing particularly interesting yet. Running Drupal 7. Let's go back here. Okay. We already know about this. Okay, let's go back here. Take a look at this documentation. Page source. Okay, for security reasons, this section is hidden. For detailed view, go here. Okay, so this is a directory. Let's check it out. Just gonna go to another tab here. Plug in that web directory. Okay, this is OpenDocMan. Let's check out the page source of this. Okay. Nothing particularly interesting here, except we do know that it is running OpenDocMan version 1.2.7. So let's go to Google and see if there's any known exploits for this. So I'm just going to copy that. Go over to another tab and Google that with exploit. Okay, we have the same version here, an exploit database with multiple vulnerabilities. So just check that out real quick. Alright. So I see here a SQL injection vulnerability. So let's try that real quick. I'm just going to copy all this. And I'll paste it in a text editor real quick. Okay. And let's just go to our OpenDocMan location and see if that works. So Okay, so let me explain why I know this worked. So what this does is a union select, and it includes the version command. Here it is right there. So what you see here is the output of that command. Therefore, at this point, we know that there is a SQL injection vulnerability present. Now we're going to use Burp Suite, which is an industry standard tool used for web application penetration testing. We're going to use its proxy to intercept traffic to the target and use that intercepted request to perform an automated series of SQL injection attacks with the SQL injection scanner Nmap. This will allow us to automatically harvest all database information. First, we need to configure Firefox's proxy in order for this to work. Click to open the menu. Click Preferences. Search for Proxy. Click Settings. Click Manual Proxy Configuration. Enter in your loopback address. Port, I'm just going to put 8080. It can be any port that's not in use. Click the Use this proxy server for all protocols box. And make sure that there is nothing in the No Proxy For box here. Now, once you click OK, you're not going to be able to use the browser without Burp Suite open. So using it without Burp Suite is going to require you to go back to this configuration setting and click No Proxy. All right, so for now, we're going to click OK. And now we will open Burp Suite. It should be over here on your favorite applications. I'm going to uncheck that. I accept. Okay, temporary project is all we can do, so click Next. Use Burp defaults, start Burp. Okay, now let's go to the Proxy tab. We're going to go to Options. Okay, it should look like this. You have your loopback address and the port that you specified in Firefox. It's running. At this point, you are proxying traffic with intercept on. So let's go back here to the open.man page, and I'm just going to click Reload. And that request is going to be proxied here in Burp Suite. So what we're going to want to do here is remove the SQL injection. Now, the vulnerable parameter here is ODM user. So what I'm going to do here is set an injection point by providing an asterisk. That's going to be interpreted by Nmap as the place where SQL injections will be targeted. So just put an asterisk right there. And now we're going to save this file, or save it as a file. So right-click anywhere in here and copy to file. I'm just going to name that file SQLI. Click Save. Now go to a terminal. So I'm just going to open a new window. Okay, so let's run SQL map. So SQL map -r SQLI, that's going to read the file that we just copied to the request from Burp Suite. And we're going to create a risk of 3, which is the max, and level of 5, which is the max. We're going to tell it to dump the database, and we're going to run batch, which is going to say yes to everything. So let's just run that command. Okay, so it's discovered a blind SQL injection, and we've enumerated tables for the database JABC docs. Right now, I want to kill this and dump the data from the ODM_user table. So let's just Control-C to kill that SQL map and make another SQL map. Same thing as before with the read and the risk. So we're going to specify the database this time and specify a table. Okay, run that. Okay, after a bit of time, we have a username of webmin and a hashed password. So let's grab that hashed password, go over to Firefox. Now we're going to have to turn off the proxy, so open menu, preferences, go to your proxy settings, and click no proxy. Now I'm just going to Google hash killer, because we need to crack this MD5 hash. So just paste it right in here, click crack my hashes, and we have webmin 1980 as the plain text of that password hash. So let's grab that. Now, if you recall from the Nmap scan, we have SSH open. So let's try those credentials there first. So open up a terminal, SSH webmin at IP address of VulnOS. Okay, I just have a little issue here, no worries. Let's try that again. Okay. Entering that password, it was webmin 1980. All right, perfect, we're in. Just make a bash shell there. Okay. So now we have to escalate privileges to root. Let's take a look at what we're working with here. lsp_release A. Okay, this is Ubuntu 14.04. So let's just go over to Google and see if there are any exploits. I'm sure there are. I remember exploiting 14.04 earlier. Okay, back to Firefox. I'm just going to use Ubuntu 14.04 privilege escalation as a Google search. And this one right here, we already have that. It's in our web directory in Kali. So that is the one we should try first. Let's just go over here to our SSH shell here and make sure that we have the necessary files. Yep, there it is, 37292.c. Just make sure that we have Apache web server running on Kali Linux. And go back to your SSH shell, change directory to the temp directory. Okay, now we're going to run the wget command, IP address of Kali Linux, and the C code 37292.c. Now we're going to use GCC to compile it. So GCC, the name of the file that we just got, 37292.c. Specify an output file, 37292. I'm going to chmod plus x, make it executable. Now let's execute it, 37292. Great. All right, we've escalated privileges to root. There's our flag. On to the next one. This is done. What we have here is a custom-made, intentionally vulnerable 32-bit Windows 7 box that was built from scratch using the free Windows 7 developer VirtualBox VM. It's very hard to find pre-made vulnerable Windows machines to practice on, and that's why there's only one of them in this course. The only other one I know of is Metasploitable 3, and that's already covered in my other course. For additional practice on Windows enumeration and exploitation, I highly suggest that you start using hackthebox.eu. This has a plethora of Windows machines to hit. I also suggest Offensive Security's PWK course, which is a prep for the coveted OSCP certification. You can download this Windows VM from the link provided within this lecture. After downloading it, double-click the OVA file, import it, and make sure that you have at least one of the interfaces configured as the same host-only interface as your Kali box. After that, jump onto Kali and let's get started. Alright, let's find the IP address, netdiscover, over the Eth1 interface. Okay, we found the IP address. Now, instead of running Nmap right away, let's hop over to the Windows 7 box because we need to make sure that a service is running in order to go forward. Okay, so we want to start a service called AChat. Now, if you already have it running, just go over here and kill it real quick, right-click, quit, and start it up from right here. So this is going to start AChat version 0.150. Now, AChat is a client which facilitates messaging, and it has a known buffer overflow vulnerability and a publicly available exploit. So I've taken the liberty to create a custom Python script based on the known buffer overflow from exploit database. As you can probably see by now, it's pretty important to understand how to code, at least a little bit, in order to modify these exploits. Otherwise, you're limited to using somebody else's hard work. I highly suggest that you check out the exploit database exploits by Googling AChat 0.150 exploit, compare them to my Python exploit, and figure out the differences. You'll need to make some minor changes to my Python exploit in order to make it work for you, but it should be pretty simple. So let's go back to our Kali box. Okay, first of all, let's use Nmap to see if we can access that port over Kali Linux. So we have port 9256, which is running AChat. Let's try Nmap -lowercase s uppercase u. That's going to change it to UDP scanning instead of TCP. And we are going to specify a port of 9256 and the IP address of the Windows 7 box. Okay, it's saying the port is open. Now, sometimes it'll say it's closed even though it is actually open, which can be pretty annoying. So if it says it's closed, then go back to your Windows box, try opening another instance of it or a couple of them. And it's not very reliable, but the port is open, and if you have it running, you should be able to run the exploit regardless. So let's move on. Okay, now we're going to open up Firefox. Just go to my GitHub page here. I'm going to copy the raw output of this Python code. Go back to the terminal here. I'm just going to make a file named achatsploit.py. Paste that Python code. Jump to the top here. Okay, so what you're going to need to do is run this MSF Venom command and replace the payload with the payload information that you need. So right here, I already see that I'm going to have to run it and replace this because earlier I had, when I made this payload or made this Python script, I had a IP address that's different than the one I have now. So this is not going to work for me right out the box. Also, I'm going to need to change this server address, which is the target, to .8. So I'll do that now. You're going to have to change this to the IP address of the Windows 7 box that you have. So let's just close that out because now we're going to have to run the MSF Venom command. I'm going to show you how to do that, and I'm going to replace the payload in order to get this to work. So save that. Alright, so I'm just going to paste this MSF Venom command here. We got a 32-bit architecture with a Windows platform and a payload of the Meterpreter reverse TCP shell for Windows. We have the IP address of the Kali Linux box with a port of 4446. We have specified an encoder of Unicode mixed. And we have a ton of bad characters that were discovered by the person who created this in exploit database, and a buffer register of EAX with exit func equals thread that helps maintain a persistent connection, and a format of Python. So let's just run that command. We're going to have to copy the results and replace the payload that is in my Python script. Okay, so let's grab this giant payload here. Now we're going to open up this hAtsploit and gedit so I can quickly just highlight all this text and delete it. Let's see here. And replace it with what I just generated. So now everything should be set up properly in order to get this exploit to work. But next we're going to have to set up a multi-handler listener in Metasploit. So let's save that and close, type in MSF console. Okay, so now we're going to set up a multi-handler listener. So use multi-handler. Set lhost to the IP address of Kali Linux. Set lport to the port that you set in the MSF Venom payload that we just created. And we are going to set payload to Windows/interpreter/reverse TCP. Now just run. All right, now we have our multi-handler listener set up. I'm just going to create a new window here. Now we are going to run our Python exploit. So just python hAtsploit.py. Okay, if it doesn't work, then go to your Windows, make sure that you have hAt listening. I may have crashed it. I'll go check that out now. Okay, so all I had to do there was kill hAt and then restart it, and it worked. So I tried it again after restarting it. You may have to do that, so I'm actually glad that happened while I was recording. Okay, so I have an interpreter shell, and what I want to do now is change it to a cmd.exe shell. So execute -f cmd.exe -i-h. All right. Cool. So now we have the shell. We've successfully exploited the buffer overflow exploit, and we can now move on to the next portion of this lab. Okay, we also have a service called Easy File Sharing FTP installed on our Windows 7 box. This also has a buffer overflow vulnerability, and I wrote up a quick Python script to exploit it directly and get a reverse shell. First off, let's start the server. You don't have to register, so I'm just going to click cancel there. All right, now we have our Easy File Sharing FTP server active, and we can move over to Kali Linux. Let's just make sure that we can access that port. So Nmap P21, port of FTP, and the IP address of Windows 7. Very good. Port open. Let's move on. So first off, let's get that ftpsploit.py Python script that I created by going to Firefox and downloading it or copying the code from my GitHub page. There it is. So I'm just going to click ftpsploit, view as raw, and just copy that. Go back to our terminal here. I'm just going to make a file called ftpsploit.py. Copy that code in. Save that. Actually, go back here. Let's take a look. Okay, yeah, so I need to make a quick change here. And you will too. So here is the sconnect function of the Python script. You're going to have to change that to the IP address of the Windows 7 machine. Now let's go up a little bit and I will show you. Yeah, we're going to have to change this as well. So what you see here is the MSF Venom command that is going to create a reverse shell back to Kali Linux. I'm going to have to change it because my IP is different. Yours is going to be different as well probably. So let's just do that real quick. So we're going to save this and run this command and replace this payload with what we get from running this command. Okay, here's your MSF Venom command, 32-bit architecture, platform of Windows. Same thing, Windows interpreter, reverse TCP shell. And as I said before, we are changing the L host to the correct IP address, and we have a L port of 4447 this time, a couple bad characters here, with an encoder of Goldeneye and format of Python. So run that command, let's get our payload, replace it, and we should be good to go. And we're also going to be starting a multi-handler listener again with MSF console. Alright, grab the payload, and we are going to change Ftpsploit. I'm just opening it up in gedit. Remove that, replace it with what we just got from MSF Venom. Everything else should be good. Now let's save that and move over to MSF console. Okay, same thing as before, use multi-handler. We're going to set the L host to the IP address of Kali Linux, same as before. Set the L port to 4447, which is what we set in the payload. Set payload, Windows Meterpreter, reverse TCP. Okay, we're going to run that. Set up another window. Alright, so Python ftpsploit.py. Very good. Okay, we have our interpreter session. I'm just going to run that same execute command. Good. So we have directly exploited the buffer overflow. And that's it for this lab. So from here, I suggest that you try installing more vulnerable services on your own and coming up with new, innovative ways to exploit them. I look forward to hearing about what services you've exploited and how you did it in the Q&A section. This lab will focus upon the enumeration and exploitation of the intentionally vulnerable VM IMF, which is another Linux box you can find on VulnHub or my Google Drive. Download it, double-click the OVA to import it, change the network settings to host only, and let's get started. So just real quick, right-click IMF settings, go to network. As you see here, they have it set to bridged. We're going to set it to host only and start it up. And after that, go to your Kali Linux box. Now let's use NetDiscover to find the IP address. Okay, I got the IP address. Now let's hit it with Nmap. Alright, we have a limited attack surface here, only port 80 open, Apache web server. So let's go open up Firefox and take a look at what we can find. Okay, before looking at it, I want to set up the proxy and open up Burp Suite. So, like we did before, open the menu, click Preferences, search for the proxy, go to your proxy settings, and you should already have that from the previous episode. Here's what it looks like. Port 8080, IP address is loopback, no proxy 4 box is clear. Now just open up Burp Suite by clicking the icon over here. Temporary project, use Burp defaults. I'm just going to turn intercepting off for now. Okay, now let's go to the IP address. Okay, we're at a home page here. Just went to projects. I'm going to view the page source. Okay, nothing interesting here. Go back. Go to the Contact Us page here. View the page source. See a flag here. It's encoded in base 64. Just going to copy that. Now go to Burp Suite and go to the decoder tab. And you can paste in that base 64 encoded string. Now click decode as base 64. You could also do it in a command line, but I'm just showing you a different way to do it. So we have something, all the files. So that could be something we need to know later. So just document that. All right, back to the web page here. Okay, I noticed these three JavaScript files. At first, I thought that this was a base 64 encoded string by itself, but it turns out that this is where it starts and this is where it ends. So you can just copy all that. I'm just going to open up LeafPad over here. Get rid of everything else other than the base 64 encoded strings. So this is all split up into three sections, but this is the base 64 encoded string right here. So same thing. Okay, so it gives us another base 64 encoded string, and that's the second flag. So I'm just going to copy that and put it up here. All right, now we have the plain text. IMF administrator. So we have two decoded strings, all the files, and IMF administrator. So those could be web directories. Let's take a look. Back to Firefox. First, I'm going to try all the files. Okay, that's not a web directory. Now, IMF administrator. Okay, so we get a login page. View the page source, see if there's anything interesting. Okay, we have a comment here. It says, I couldn't get the SQL working, so I hard-coded the password. It's still mad secure though. Okay, so they mentioned SQL. Maybe there's an SQL injection that we could use here. So let's try that out. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is turn on the Burp Suite proxy intercept. So you go to the proxy tab, intercept is on. Now I'm just going to put in test for the username and password, or let's try Jesse test, and click login. So we have two parameters here, the user and pass parameter. That is what we're going to send over to the intruder. And we are going to try to bypass the authentication using SQL injection. So clear all the parameters. We're going to set an injection point for pass. Now payloads, I have a little list here. Here's some payloads that are going to attempt to bypass the authentication. So start the attack. Click OK. Let this thing run. You take a look at the response. So you get invalid username. And basically, if it is able to bypass authentication, we'll get a different response. I'm not sure what it is yet, but this is not the response we're looking for. You can sort it by length. That'll show you if there is a positive result, or you can manually look at them, but usually it'll have a different length if you succeeded. Okay, so after trying a good amount of SQL injection for authentication bypass unsuccessfully, I did some research and I found this OWASP article. It says that we can submit an array in the password parameter, or pass in our case, which is going to cause strcmp to think the password is null and allow us to bypass authentication. So strcmp is basically a function that compares two strings. Let's go back to Burp Suite and put this to the test. You got to make sure that your intercepting proxy is on. Just going to put in Jesse and test. You got that. right click anywhere here, send to repeater. Okay, now exactly what they told us to do. Have these two square brackets before the equal sign and pass. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try a different username. Interesting. So it's not working. It has to be a valid user. Okay. So it's not working with incorrect usernames. Perhaps I need to use a valid user. I'm going to do a little bit more testing. Okay, so going back to the contact.php page, I noticed that we have 3 potentially valid usernames. We have R. Michaels, A. Keith, and E. Stone. So let's try all of these and see if we can get through here. First, I'm trying R. Michaels. Okay, now we've bypassed authentication. I see a flag here, and it's going to point us to cms.php, page home equals home. So let's go first to this base64 encoded string. Okay, it just says continue to CMS, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to right click anywhere in here, request in browser, an original session. So we're just going to repeat this request in a browser. Just clear this up a little bit. All right, now click this. All right, earlier they said we couldn't get SQL working in the HTML. So what I'm going to do now is intercept a request to this page and send it over to SQL Map so we can run a SQL Map scan and see if there's any directly exploitable SQL injection so we can dump the database. Let's go over here, back to the proxy. Intercepting is on. Now just reload that page to get a request going. Now we're going to use this page name equals home as the injection point. So I'm going to just go over here, and what I'm going to do is place an asterisk here in page name equals, and that's where all the SQL injections are going to hit. All right, so put the asterisk there. Now right click anywhere, and we're going to copy to file. I'm just going to name it SQLi2. Go to a terminal. Okay, the command is going to be SQL map -r. We're going to read the SQLi2 file that we just created. -risk 3, that's the max. -level equals 5, that's also the max. -dbs, we're going to be dumping the database if possible. And batch is going to say yes to everything, and we are going to give it multi-threading with 10 threads. Let's go. Very good. We have exploited an error-based SQL injection vulnerability and have dumped the admin database. Now I see down here there's a link to a .jpg file. So let's just copy that location. I'll minimize this for now, back to Firefox. So just right-click and duplicate a tab here for the IMF administrators web directory, and we're going to paste that in. Okay. So let's just save that. Alright, so let's take a good look at this picture here. There's a little box in the bottom left corner, and that is a QR code. And that can be decoded online. So I'm going to just open a new tab here and Google QR decode. Okay, looks like we're having some issues here, probably due to Burp Suite. Gonna have to show you how to fix that. So, before you can access stuff on the internet while you're running Burp Suite, you're gonna have to do this. http://burp. Now we're gonna grab the CA certificate, save file, go to menu here, preferences. In the search box here, just type in cert. So bring you to the certificates that you have. And under authorities, you're going to click import and import that certificate that you just got from Burp Suite. Trust. Click OK. Click OK. Now there's one more thing we need to do. I'm just going to open up another terminal here and just exit out of Firefox because we're going to have to restart it anyway. So there's a bug when you're using Java 11, so we're going to have to change it to Java 8 in order to get SSL working properly. So update alternatives --config Java, and we're going to select 2, which is going to downgrade us to Java 8. All right. Let's restart Burp Suite. Restart Firefox. Okay. Back to the IMF administrator location. We're going to have to run that R. Michaels and password trick again. So just intercept a request to it. Just going to put it into the repeater real quick and put those square brackets here in the pass parameter. Make sure it's working real quick. Okay. So just request in browser in original session. Turn that proxy off. Oh. So you just go right in. Good. All right. Okay, let's try that again. So all I wanted to do was Google QR decode. And now we are able to do it with those minor changes. And I see this decoder online for barcodes. So let's go there first and see if that works. Okay, so what this does is it allows us to upload an image file, which is going to then be analyzed automatically for the QR code. So let's just browse it. Go to your downloads folder, and we have whiteboard.jpg. Now submit query. Awesome. Right away we got the decode, and it's the 4th flag and a base 64 encoded string. So let's just copy that. We already have Burp Suite open, so go to the decoder and paste that decode as base 64. All right, looks like we have a PHP file, maybe another web directory, so let's just copy that back to IMF and duplicate a tab. Let's take a look. Okay, intelligence upload form. Okay, so my first thought is upload a PHP reverse shell. So let's go over to a terminal here. And I'm going to use a really cool tool named Weavely that is going to generate a PHP backdoor and try to exploit it. So let's go ahead and use that tool. Okay, so to do this, Weebly generate, then you pick a password. I'm going to name it Jesse. Then you pick a file name. I'm just going to name it backdoors.php. Okay, here it is. Now let's try to upload that. I'm going to have Burp Suite running so I can just see what it looks like. So we have browse. I have it in my root directory, and I named it backdoors.php. Here it is. So let's attempt to upload that and take a look at what transpires over the requests. So I have a post request here, a content type of PHP, and here's the payload. Let's see what happens. Okay, it says invalid file type. So clearly they have some sort of filtering in place that does not allow PHP files to be uploaded. Let's try to bypass that real quick. So let's do the same thing we just did. Upload. Okay, now down here at the content type, it specifies that it is a PHP file. So I'm going to just change that and name it image JPEG to try to trick the security mechanism. Alright, so that didn't work. We're going to have to find a different way to do it. Okay, so let's go back to a terminal. I'm just in the directory where I created the PHP file. I'm going to change the name of it with the move command to backdoors.gif. So we're going to try to trick the upload mechanism to think that it is a GIF file instead of PHP. So after we change the file extension, let's go in here with a text editor using V, and I'm going to add a GIF header with the hexadecimal value of a GIF header, and that should allow us to successfully upload this file. So save that, and we'll go back to the upload page and try this again. Good. File successfully uploaded. Okay, let's just view the page source real quick. And I notice a value here in the comments. So it's a little bit confusing and counterintuitive, but this value here is what the GIF file is renamed to after uploading it. And it's also in a directory that is called uploads. So I will show you how to exploit this now. Alright, so the command to directly exploit this is going to be another Weebly command. So we have the IP address, IMF administrator, uploads, and that unique value that was generated that we found in the HTML.gif. Right, so I need the password. So whatever password you created with that PHP file, there we go. Good. All right, so now we have a limited shell. Right away, I see a flag, so I'm just going to cat that flag. Another base64 encoded string, so copy that. If you still have Burp Suite open, just pop that into the decoder. Okay, we have a string agent services. All right, so maybe a clue as to what we need to find here in the file system. Now I'm going to use a find command to search for the string agent and redirect the errors to dev null, which essentially blocks it from our view. So let's go to find /name agent and this redirection to dev null so we don't see all the errors. Okay, I see a binary right here for agent. Let me just run it real quick. Okay, it's some custom binary and it is looking for an agent ID, which we do not know. So, some sort of reporting system. Let's go ahead and try to see what services are running. Alright, so netstat-ant. We're going to just take a look at the running services. We got MySQL, SSH, port 80. We already know about that, but here's one we do not know about, 7788. Let's take a look at that. I'm just going to use netcat and the loopback address, which is just the internal IP, and then the 7788 port. Alright, so connecting to that port tries to access this binary, this IMF agent reporting system, which is the agent binary we saw earlier. So we did not see that port running when we ran the Nmap scan. Now let's go to the user local bin directory, see if there's anything else that's useful here. That's where the agent binary is. Okay, so I see the agent binary and I also see a file called access codes. So I'm just going to cat that real quick, see what's in it. Alright, we have 3 numbers separated with commas. I can only guess that these are port numbers. They look like port numbers, but it's actually a number sequence that can be utilized for port knocking. So what is port knocking? It's a methodology that allows us to access inaccessible ports by sending certain connection attempts. We can automate this with this tool knock that I'll get from GitHub, and I'll show you where it is. So first of all, let's just close out a Burp suite. We don't need this anymore. I'm going to also turn off the proxy. So just no proxy. All right. So here's the GitHub page for knock. I'm going to clone it. So just grab the clone URL here. Just type git clone and paste in that URL we just got from GitHub. Good. I'm just going to go to that knock folder. Okay, so what we're going to do here is run knock. We have the IP address of IMF, and we have the 3 numbers that were retrieved from the access code files. So this should open port 7788. Okay, so let's verify that port 7788 is now open. So Nmap-p 7788 and the IP address of IMF. Very good. So we've utilized port knocking to open port 7788. Now I want to grab the executable, ship it over to Kali Linux, and find out how it works, see if we can exploit it somehow. So first I want to download and install RetDeck, which is a very cool decompiler that's going to automate a lot of the analysis for us. I'm going to show you where to get it and how to install it. So let's go over to Firefox. Just open up a new tab here. I'm going to show you the GitHub location. Alright, so go to GitHub, here it is, and we're going to clone it, same as before, so grab that clone URL. Back to our shell, I'm just going to go to my home directory, and we are going to type git clone, and then the URL that was just copied. Okay, that's the first step. It says, couple things we have to do here. It's going to take a little bit of time. So first I'm going to install the dependencies. I'm going to show you that now, and I'm going to also have all of these commands listed in the text file that's attached to this lecture. So let's Just install all these dependencies. Yes to everything. Okay, first off, we're going to change directories to retdec. We're going to make a directory called build and change to that directory. And now we're going to prepare the make and install. So we have this is going to be the location for the installation, which is home and retdec. Should be the same for you if you followed my tutorial here. This whole process takes a little while. Now we're just going to run a make and make install. Okay, after that is finally downloaded and installed, let's go over to the Weebly shell, and we're going to use a command :file_download. We're going to specify the location of the agent binary and also specify the location where we want to put it in Kali Linux. So I have here the retdec binary location where we're going to run the binary against the agent binary. So let's run that command and now go back to Kali Linux where it is downloaded. Here's the directory where I put it, root retdec bin. Here it is. Okay, so now what we want to do is run the retdec decompiler, which is right here. I'm just going to type in // the name of the Python decompiler that we're going to run, and agent. All right. So that has decompiled, and now you see here we have a bunch of files which were created as the result of the decompiler running against agent. So now I want to take a look at the contents of these files here. Okay, now I'm going to run cat agent star. That's going to cat all the files that start with the name agent. And then I'm going to pipe that to less and use the SR switch to remove carriage returns. And we will go down a couple lines here. Okay, I see the functions. Now let's take a look at this. Okay. So, the agent ID is going to rely on this right here. This hexadecimal is where the agent ID is hard-coded. So, let's take this string and we're going to decode that or convert it into decimal. So we could do that on command line. We'll just exit out of that. And I'm going to do echo $, and then close that. Okay. So we have the decimal representation of that string that was hard-coded into the agent binary that we just decompiled. And I am now going to try to use that to enter in as the agent ID. So chmod plus X, we're going to make agent executable. Okay, now it's asking us for the agent ID. I'm just going to plug in that value. Okay, now we have authenticated into this binary. Now it has 3 different options. One of the options is to submit a report. Let's try that one. Okay, and you just put input, so it accepts input into this report function. Let's try sending a bunch of characters to it and see how it reacts. We're going to create 200 A characters with a quick Python code here. Print A times 200. So it's just going to create 200 A's. All right. First of all, we're going to enter in that agent ID and now submit report with the 3 option, and I'm going to plug in those 200 A's. Okay, look down here. We have a segmentation fault. So if you're familiar with my past courses, you know what this means. We're going to have to create a custom buffer overflow exploit. And since we have remote access to this service, we could potentially get a nice reverse shell with elevated privileges. First, we're going to have to run a Ruby script called pattern create to generate a unique pattern of 200 characters, because that's how many characters it took to crash the application. And we're going to find the extended instruction pointer, or EIP, which is going to tell the binary which command to execute next, and it is necessary information to exploit this binary. So we're going to type in locate pattern underscore create, and here it is. Just plug that in, specify a length of 200. Okay, now I'm going to use GNU Debugger, which is a command line debugger that is built into Kali Linux, and I'm going to type in agent. That's going to start the binary agent with GNU Debugger. Now we're going to run the binary, and we know the agent ID now, so we can go in there, submit report, and we are going to plug in that string of 200 characters here. Okay, so now we know the value with which the EIP was overwritten, which is right here. So we need to document this information and keep on moving. Now we're going to use pattern offset to calculate the pattern offset, which is going to be shown to you right now. So locate pattern underscore offset. And we are going to use that value which was just discovered with the -q switch, and it is going to calculate the pattern offset. Okay, we have a pattern match of 168. Armed with this necessary information, let's continue our exploit development. First, we're going to have to create some malicious shellcode with MSF Venom. So I have this command here. We're going to use a Linux reverse shell payload, which is in the 32-bit architecture. And we have our local host, which is going to be the Kali Linux IP. And we have the local port, which is going to be 4448. A format of Python, and we are specifying some bad characters. So we haven't actually searched for bad characters for this particular binary. However, we know that the null character, or x00, is always bad. And these are commonly bad, which is the 0A for a line feed and a 0D for carriage return. So we're just going to specify those as bad characters and create our malicious shellcode with MSF Venom. Okay, now what we're going to do is use obj dump and try to find a vulnerable JMP or call to execute shellcode at EAX. This is necessary, otherwise we will not have an address to instruct the binary to execute our shellcode. So what we're going to do is type in obj dump -d, name of the binary, which is agent, and we're going to pipe that to grep and search for JMP, then pipe that to another grep, searching for EAX. Okay, no luck there. Let's change the JMP to call. All right, we have an address here. Now we can use this address and reverse it and put it into bytecode format in order to instruct our exploit to execute shellcode at that specific address. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. I've already written up a Python script which is on my GitHub page. So I'm going to walk you through how to change that in order to get it to work for you. Okay, so jump over to Firefox real quick. Here's my GitHub page. I have a Python script called agentsploit. So I'm just going to view that in raw, copy that, and we are going to just make a new file, agentsploit.py. Paste that in there. Let's take a look at this. So we have the 168 A's minus the length of the buffer. I'll go up a little bit. So you're going to have to replace this with the shellcode that you have generated. And I already have the address here that was converted, the call EAX address. It was converted from the format that we discovered with object dump, and it has been reversed, as you can see here, and converted into bytecode. Now we have some arguments, which are going to be the server and port. So we can just specify the target and the port, which is going to be 7788. And I've created some sconnects here. So sconnect, it's first going to ask us for the agent ID, which I put here. So it's going to automatically enter the agent ID. It's going to receive response, which is going to ask us for which entry we want, and that's going to be 3 to choose to submit report. And then it's going to send the buffer, or send the buffer overflow, and that should get us a reverse shell. But first, obviously, we need to have netcat running, so let's do that first. Actually, I'm going to have to replace the shellcode, because this is going to be different for me as well. I have a different IP address, so I'm just going to use gedit. Alright, so just remove that and replace it with MSF Venom's output. Save that. Okay, now let's get another terminal going. I'm going to type in nc-nlvp4448. Okay, so what we want to do here is Python agentsploit.py, IP address of the target, and the port was 7788. So this should exploit the buffer overflow exploit that we have done locally over the wire, because now we have opened that port with port knocking, and we have the listener over here. Let's see if it works. Perfect. So now we have a root shell. Let's go ahead and use our trusty Python code to make a TUTY shell. Oh, interesting. So that did not work. Let's try... that didn't work either. So it's giving us some problems here. Let me see. All right. Fair enough, we'll use that. So anyway, let's go to root, and we have our flag and something called theend.text. Very good. Just for fun, let's see what is in this base64 encoded string. We can just do that with command line. Ghost protocols. Okay. Well, we're done here. Got root privileges, and we are ready to go on to the last lab. The public firing range is a spectacular resource for practicing several exploitation techniques, but mainly cross-site scripting, or XSS. We're going to cover several XSS exploitation techniques in detail, showing where the vulnerability exists, how to exploit it, and why the exploit works. While we're only going to cover a certain portion of the site, I suggest that you thoroughly exploit every one of these vulnerabilities manually and do your best to understand everything there is to know about these vulnerabilities. It's one thing to automatically scan vulnerable web applications, but it's another to completely understand how the web application works and how to exploit it without the use of automated tools. This is how to bring your penetration testing skills to a new level. Okay, so what is XSS? It's a type of injection that allows malicious scripts to be injected into an otherwise benign and trusted website, which impacts vulnerable web applications. This can allow attackers to hijack sessions, perform arbitrary actions on the victim's behalf, and log keystrokes. However, This usually requires some sort of social engineering in order to carry out the attack. There are generally three types of XSS: reflected, stored, and DOM-based. Reflected XSS, which is also called non-persistent XSS, is where a script is reflected into the response of the web application and executed in the browser. Stored XSS is much more dangerous, because it allows attackers to inject XSS payloads into targets, and it executes every time that the web application is accessed. DOM-based XSS is confined entirely within the client side, as no requests to the web application are required for exploitation due to a modification in the document object model environment. For those who are unfamiliar with XSS, or if any of what I just said doesn't make sense, please refer to the URLs within the text file attached to this lecture and read up on it prior to continuing. It's assumed that most people have at least a high-level understanding of it before attempting this course. For enumeration and exploitation, we're going to want to use Burp Suite. Unfortunately, the free version of Burp Suite does not include the scanner. As an aspiring or current pen tester, I highly suggest that you buy Burp Suite Professional, as the pricing is nominal and it's the best tool hands down for web application penetration testing available for automated and manual testing. As far as automated scanners go, Acunetics is second best in my opinion, specifically for web applications, but it does not have the manual aspects and the high level of customization that Burp Suite Professional has. That being said, let's load up Firefox and configure the proxy and start up Burp Suite. So first, click Firefox over here, and we will do the same thing we did in the past few lectures. You click Menu, click Preferences, go to your proxy settings, click Settings, and here is the proxy configuration. Should be familiar with that by now. Now launch Burp Suite. Temporary project, use Burp defaults. And for now, we will turn the intercepting proxy off. And let's go to public firing range. Here's the website right here. Okay, I'm going to introduce you to the spider, which is going to allow us to basically enumerate the website and find all injectable parameters within this firing range. But first, we're going to specify a scope. So we're going to go back to Burp Suite, and I have the target tab, then go to the scope tab, and with this URL copied, I'm going to click paste URL. It's going to ask us, do you want to stop sending out of scope items to the history or other Burp tools? Yes. So now we are only going to focus upon this one. So I'm going to also filter to show only in-scope items. We're only going to see stuff coming from this URL, and only show parameterized requests. Those are the ones that are going to have injectable parameters. So right now we have nothing because we just filtered out everything. And now we are going to go to reflected XSS. First of all, we're going to go to Spider, and you see it's paused and has a bunch of requests queued. So click that, and it is going to Spider all that it can. Now it's doing its job. So just let that run until it goes to 0. Okay, after that's done, I'm just going to pause it and go back to target. All right, you can see here, it's automatically found all these injectable parameters. Very convenient. Takes away all of the manual clicking and figuring it out on your own. So anyway, let's go back to reflected cross-site scripting. We're going to focus on this for a while. So let's just go to the very first one. All right. Okay, back to the Burp Suite proxy. Turn intercepting on. And what I'm going to do is reload the page to get a request going. and I'm going to send that to the repeater by right-clicking and clicking Send to Repeater. And click Go. Let's analyze the response from the web application. So what it is doing now is sending in a character to the web application, and the response, it's reflecting it within an HTML and body tag. All right. So what I want to do first is replace this A input with several characters which are generally used in various XSS payloads. This is not going to exploit anything. It'll just show us what we're able to throw at the web application and how it encodes it within its response. So click Go. Okay, looks like it is encoding everything up to the ampersand. So at this point, I have a good idea that this web application is vulnerable to XSS. And I should be able to make a working payload at this point. So what I'm going to do is go back to the proxy tab and turn intercepting off. Go right back here, and I'm going to just type in script alert 1 closing script. So just take a look at that real quick. It's a very basic XSS payload, very generic. It's probably the first thing that everybody's taught when they're showed XSS. All right, good. So this is using script alert, and it is executing the JavaScript as expected. Okay, so let's click out of that. I'm just going to show you the page source. This is how it was rendered. Now, let me explain exactly what happened here. A common misconception in reflected XSS is that JavaScript is being executed on the server side. This is not the case. This JavaScript alert 1 is actually being executed within the client side as a result of the insecurely configured web application echoing my input with no encoding, such as HTML encoding, which would not allow it to be rendered as JavaScript in my web browser. There's also web application firewalls, which would stop things such as script or HTML tags from being sent to the web application at all. While prompting an alert with the number 1 inside of it does not look like a big deal, and it's not a big deal, there are way more advanced JavaScript XSS payloads that can be leveraged to cause actual harm, as I previously mentioned. This is merely a proof of concept, which is all we need to prove the existence of the vulnerability as the good guys who are trying to get this stuff fixed. Hopefully all of what I just said makes sense to you. If not, feel free to hit me up on the messaging or Q&A system with specific questions, or do some research on your own, as there's a ton of information about this. Okay? So let's move on to another one that will not work with that simple generic payload. Okay, I'm going to go to this parameter title one, but first I'm going to intercept the request and click it. So we got this parameter title, and I'm going to send it to the repeater and click go so I can take a look at this. Okay, so we have some HTML here, very basic. It has a head, a title, and body tag along with HTML tag. So this A right here is being reflected in between these title tags. So I'll just show you real quick that the previous payload will not work in this case. So I have script alert 1 script. Okay, it's not working. See, it's not being interpreted as JavaScript. So we're going to have to find a way around that. Okay, this is where knowledge of how to write HTML and JavaScript comes in handy. So it's allowing us to send basically whatever we want in it, except for the ampersand and the brackets, as I showed earlier, the curly brackets and what have you. But we can run script tags and other types of tags. So what I'm going to do here is just close the title tag. So see if that works. Yes, it does work. So I've closed this title tag. Therefore, I should be able to run script alert 1 and have it interpreted as JavaScript. Let's give that a shot. So just right click, request in browser, And I'm going to open up another tab here. Perfect. All right, now we have executed JavaScript. So all I had to do there was close that title tag. And then I created a new tag which gave me free reign to just write my JavaScript. Here it is. And it broke the HTML essentially. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. We're going to go to proxy, intercepting on, and we're going to do the body HTML comment one. So toss that over to the repeater. Okay, as we see here, the input A is being reflected into a comment. Now, obviously, that is going to not be interpreted as JavaScript. It's going to be interpreted as a comment, which is not even going to be used as code. It's going to be treated as just text. So what I can do here is close the comment. So I see how it's closed here. If you're familiar with HTML, that should close the comment right there. So let's try that. I'm just going to close that comment. Okay. So it is closed and I can inject JavaScript in here. So let's just create our generic JavaScript payload. Send it again. See how it's looking? Looking good here. So I've closed the comment and created my JavaScript here. So let's just right click, request in browser an original session, see if it works. Obviously you have to turn off that proxy and send that in. Good. All right, so that has worked. I'll show you the page source again. There it is. Okay, on to the next one. Intercepting on, parameter tag name, right click, send to repeater. Okay, click go. Oh, all right. So this one's being enclosed within pointy brackets. So it's creating a tag with the input of A in it. So that's an easy one right there. All I have to do with this one is close that bracket off. That should just give me the ability to create my JavaScript right there. You take a look here. Yeah, so I'm closing off this bracket and creating my JavaScript. That should work no problem. So let's go ahead and request in browser. I'm going to turn off the proxy first. Very good. Okay, we've executed JavaScript. Take a look at the source so you can see it again. I've just closed off that tag, created a new tag. There's my JavaScript, executed, no problem. All right, now let's go on to one that's a little bit more difficult. Okay, back to the home page of public firing range, and we're going to go to tag-based XSS. And I'm going to go to multi-line tags. Okay, here we are. So intercepting on, reload that page, right click, send to repeater, click go. All right, so this is a little bit different, and I'm going to show you why. Let's do the same thing we did at the beginning, send a bunch of characters into it, see what's being rendered. Okay. So it has some sort of web application firewall or some sort of security mechanism that is not allowing us to send tags. What is a tag? Let me show you. Just remove all this stuff here. That's a tag. It is not going to allow us to send that. I can send one of them, but I can't send anything with these. That's going to be a little bit problematic if we want to use the same method that we used in the previous demonstrations. So we're going to have to find a way around that. Lucky for us, there's a ton of different payloads we can use that do not rely on tags. Let me show you one of them right now. Okay? So let me explain what this does. First of all, SVG is scalable vector graphics. It can be utilized within HTML, and with this XSS payload, I can call the JavaScript event handler onLoad, and that is going to execute JavaScript immediately after the web page is loaded, as the name would suggest. So in this case, after the page is loaded, alert 1 will prompt if the XSS attack is successful. Let's just send it here. Looks good to me. So let's send this to the browser and see if it works. Okay, so turn proxy off. Right click, request in browser, an original session, and we are going to paste that into Firefox. Okay, it did not work. Let's find out why. Okay, it is not being interpreted as JavaScript because it's being broken. I think we need to have a space here. So let's go back to the repeater here. And I'm going to type in %20, which is encoded, but it is actually a space. So let me show you real quick in the decoder. You send that, decode as HTML. Decode as URL. And as you see here, that decodes to a space. So that's URL encoded. All right. So it's actually working properly. Now let's see if that will work. So request in browser, same thing as before. Okay, that time we got JavaScript execution. Just take a look here how it's being rendered. All right. So with that small fix, we've bypassed the security mechanisms that were in place and have successfully carried out our XSS attack. That's all I'm going to cover for now, but I highly suggest that you attempt to exploit everything on the page at your own pace. If you find any cool and innovative ways to exploit or run into any problems, feel free to reach out to me on the Q&A or messaging system, as I have a high level of interest in this subject matter.